Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is Twist in Time in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Chapter 31, Truth. Shikamaru was on guard duty. One that he totally did not sign up for, but as things have been happening lately, he'd simply been threatened, or as Naruto would like to say, persuaded, into doing the job. So he stood outside the room currently occupied by the two Jinhyurikis, cursing their existence under his breath. Because he knew the headache he'd soon have to face when Suna shinobi came swarming at their location due to the colossal outbreak of chakra from the inside of the room not too long ago. Shikamaru knew vaguely what Naruto was up to. The blonde had said something about repairing Gaara's seal that kept the Baijuyu imprisoned inside him, but nowhere in that explanation had Naruto mentioned just how exactly he would be achieving that. And he sure as hell hadn't forewarned Shikamaru about how he was going to completely dismantle the seal and build it anew. Hey you! Some Suna Jounin barked, and Shikamaru tried his best to ignore the existence of the man. More footsteps joined the Soul Jounin, and in no time, an entire squad of shinobi was standing before Shikamaru, eyeing him like he was a particularly disgusting species of insect. "Hi," Shikamaru said, expression carefully blank, "how may I help you?" A kunoichi with long black hair stepped forward, narrowing her eyes at the door Shikamaru stood in front of. "What's going on in there? What are you Konoha shinobi up to?" Shikamaru shrugged, "My friend's in there. I was just standing here basking in the sun. Not much dry, hot air in Konoha, you know. I find it oddly pleasant." "Oh yeah." The Jounin from before looked thoroughly unimpressed, "Then move out of the way, lad. We'd like to meet your friend." Shikamaru looked straight at the man. "My friend is changing his clothes, and unless you'd like to see his naked butt, it'll be in your best interest to stay where you are." He gracefully moved out of the way, and waited patiently for them to make a move. The Jounin at least had the decency to look sheepish, though he hid it behind a cough. "Oh the man said, "Okay then. We will, wait here then. Till he's done. Shouldn't take too long." A few shinobi murmured their suspicions, but Shikamaru's deceptively uncaring attitude gave nothing away. Instead, he shouted through the door saying, "Naruto! These nice Suna folks want to meet you. Hurry up with the dressing up, will you?" "Yes. Yes." Naruto's equally loud voice made it through the door. "Just trying to put on this tight t-shirt. You know how tricky those can be to get on." Shikamaru hid a smirk expertly when one of the Jounin nodded slightly in agreement and continued with his impassive stance while they waited for Naruto. A few things falling and scraping drew the attention of the ninja outside, but the threat of seeing someone nude inside made them stick to their places. Thankfully, before anyone could get too antsy to throw decency out the window and barge in, the door flew open and Naruto stepped outside, with a tight black t-shirt to stay true with his cover story. He grinned at the assembled Jounin. "Sorry for that delay. I like to experiment with my clothing a lot. It's a whole process, you realize. Picking up the trousers that are not too itchy, and just tight enough fit comfortably while still allowing unhindered movement. The kunoichi of the group snorted, "We get it, you're particular about what you wear. But that doesn't mean we're interested in your fashion-related opinions." "Damn," Naruto grumbled, "and here I thought I'd give y'all my makeup tips next." Shikamaru, with much difficulty, kept a smile off his face. "So, what's the matter? Not that I don't mind your esteemed presence, but I'm guessing there's a reason y'all are here." Another shinobi straightened up and stepped forward. This one had two ugly scars running down his right cheek and beady brown eyes. "Our sensors informed us about a chakra fluctuation here. A huge outflow of it. It disappeared as soon as it had appeared, though. We must investigate the source of it." He paused, scanning Naruto's frame critically, before he decided something to himself. "I think there might be an artifact in here. This hotel's notorious for hiding seals without legal authorization. I suggest you two to find better lodgings." Naruto nodded sincerely at the man, the perfect picture of ignorance and innocence. "Understood, Shinobi-san. We'll just leave for now and come back to collect our things later. You can go inside and check for anything sketchy." The squad of shinobi shuffled inside, but the kunoichi stood firmly where she was. Naruto thought she'd seen through their bullshit, but she made no move to give them away. The blonde shared one look with Shikamaru and both hurried downstairs and out the inn they'd rented a room in, just to reseal Shukaku and Gaara. The moment Naruto turned the corner, a fist of sand collided with his torso and he fell on his ass. Shikamaru raised a bemused brow when an irate Gaara came into view, glaring daggers at Naruto. What the fuck was that, Naruto? Despite the anger clearly oozing off of Gaara, his tone was emotionless. Shikamaru respected that. What was what? Naruto asked, standing up while cradling his bruised body part. You threw me out the window. Both of Shikamaru's brows went up at that. It was necessary, Naruto replied in the utmost serious tone he could muster. You threw me out the window. Without any warning whatsoever. I ought to kill you for this. Naruto looked at Shikamaru for help, but the Nara was not on his side. You definitely should, he told Gaara. If I understand correctly, Naruto just attempted murder. You're within your rights to kill him. Gaara nodded his head in approval. Naruto cast him a dubious look before rolling his eyes at both of them. So funny, guys. Haha. Now can we get going? Those shinobi won't find anything in the room. I made sure of it, but I don't want to take any chances if they come back to interrogate us or some shit. I guess I can put a hold on my plans to put an end to your existence, Gaara said reasonably, and Shikamaru snorted. Naruto started walking and the two fell in step beside him. I can't hear him anymore, Gaara mumbled later, when they were sitting in a small restaurant. Then the seal worked. Naruto grinned brightly, and maybe Gaara's smile was a small, tiny thing, but it was just as effective as Naruto's exuberance. All thanks to you, Uzumaki. Underscore 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 underscore. Are you sure I can't accompany you? Sakura asked Sasuke as he strapped on his kunao pouch, a frown worrying her features. No, Sasuke replied, not unkindly. The Hokage was quite clear in his message. Only I am supposed to meet him. Well, I can still try to convince him. Sakura. Something in Sasuke's voice made her stop and listen. I appreciate everything you've done for me these past couple days, but I think I can handle myself now. Trust me, all right. Her lips thinned into a straight line, but she nodded at him and stood down for now. She had to let Sasuke deal with some of the recent developments by himself. She knew how averse to help he really was, and she didn't want to force her aid onto him if he didn't ask for it. But she didn't have a good feeling about this meeting yet. She couldn't really do much about it except trust Sasuke to keep his cool. Get going then, she said, handing him his forehead protector. You don't want to be late for this. Sasuke threw her a meaningful look before accepting the offered piece of metal and rushed out the door. Sakura waited for 10 minutes before getting too restless to sit still. Oh, for fuck's sake, she mumbled agitatedly and grabbed a bag, filled it with snacks and went straight to Ino's. She needed a distraction. Underscore 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 underscore. Hiruzen Sarutobi was more apprehensive about the upcoming confrontation than all the shinobi wars he'd fought and bled in. It was going to be difficult, but it had to be done. After all the people he'd failed, he couldn't afford to not do the right thing now. His student, Jiraiya, stood beside his chair. For once the Sunin had a grim look on his face, and every once in a while Hiruzen could feel a distinct stream of disappointment directed at him. He thought he deserved it. By the side of the room, on a comfortable chair, sat the Yamanaka clan head. The man was incredibly somber, and unlike Jiraiya, he wasn't hiding his looks of discontent towards the Hokage. A knock on the door indicated the arrival of the final member of this gathering, and Hiruzen called out a soft "come in." Sasuke walked inside, immediately on guard due to the palpable tension drifting within the room. Hiruzen discreetly activated all his privacy seals, ones that even Danzo was unaware of, and beckoned the stone-faced boy to take a seat. Sasuke sat on the chair beside Inoichi without so much as a head nod towards the leader of the village. Sasuke-kun. How are you doing today? Hiruzen tried to ask amiably, but even years of conditioning couldn't keep the stiff tone out of his voice. Sasuke frowned at him. I'd appreciate it if we could just get to point, Hokage-sama. I don't think anyone's in a mood for idle chit-chat. Hiruzen's neatly folded hands found themselves rubbing at his temples, and he braced himself for the upcoming conversation. Very well, he said, before we begin, Sasuke, I just want you to know that I'll be completely honest with you today. I haven't been much of that before, but no more. What I say is going to be the truth, and while you may need proof of it, I'd like you to trust me if you can. Sasuke nodded hesitantly, all his attention solely on the cage. Your brother, as you may know, committed a heinous crime all those years ago and massacred your clan. Sasuke frowned again, not sure if he knew where Hiruzen was going with this. Yes, he replied, what about it? The truth is, Sasuke-kun, that Itachi, he did that. He massacred your clan not for some heartless test of his strength. He did it on the orders of the village elders. He did it because I was too incompetent to prevent it. Inoichi stiffened, waiting for some reaction now that the bomb had been dropped. But none came. Sasuke stared at the Hokage, uncomprehending and unblinking. Itachi murdered everyone. He killed them because he is a sick bastard. He said matter-of-factly. Hiruzen gulped and looked wearily at Sasuke, the insurmountable guilt weighing down on his eyes. No, Sasuke. Itachi was a wonderful young man that I have failed many times over. He was 13 when he was forced to kill his own clan, his own parents. The Uchihas, they were not happy about how they were treated within the village. Made outcasts and considered with disdain. All because I didn't take any steps towards inspiring unity within the village. Didn't do anything about clearing the Uchiha's names after the Nine Tails attacked Konoha. Please try to remember, Sasuke, was there a time when you felt like your clan was always unhappy, your father was angry? Sasuke still looked painfully confused, but he managed to nod, yes. I was 7. But I remember things changing. Father and Itachi having constant fights. Shisui and Itachi, sneaking out in the middle of the night. Hiruzen sighed, yes. That was when the tensions between the Uchiha clan and the rest of Konoha reached a culmination, and the Uchihas started planning a coup to overthrow the village authority and start a full-blown civil war within Konoha. Sasuke's hands gripped his thighs, trying desperately to come up with a scenario different than what Hiruzen was painting. Because he didn't think he could live with this truth. He didn't want to. Itachi was a double agent at this point. Itachi and Shisui. But they both were loyal to Konoha before their clans. And I think your father knew that, somewhere he was aware that his son wasn't going to support him. The council and I discussed solutions. Anything to de-escalate the situation. The clan elders and your father weren't interested in negotiations or discussions. It was too late. I was too late. I should have realized when things started going downhill, but I didn't. And then the village elders decided upon another strategy to prevent the looming civil war. Sasuke stared at the floor, unable to look at Hiruzen's face. His face was incredibly pale and his sandals tried to dig into the floor. Massacre, he muttered, horrified and hysterical. That was their solution. Hiruzen stayed silent for a long time. Yes, he said finally, it was the only choice we had left. Only choice? Sasuke asked softly, seemingly to himself before he faced Hiruzen again, eyes morphed into the Sharingan. His 3 tomos whirled threateningly in the sea of red, and neither Jiraiya nor Inoichi stood up for their cage. Only choice? He repeated with a tinge of disbelief, no. You had several choices. Heaps and heaps of options. You could have given my clan another location to establish our district. You could have run inter-clan relationship campaigns. You could have given my clan the autonomy they desired. You could have handed a seat in the council to my father. Hell, you could have gone knocking on every single fucking door in Konoha and told every person that the Uchihas weren't goddamn evil. You could have done so much, but instead you chose to kill off hundreds of innocents, including children who had no idea what was going on, and now you have the audacity to say you had no choice. Sasuke took a deep breath. He was standing now, his chair forgotten in his bubbling rage, and he calmed himself from lashing out. Well, guess what, Sarutobi, Sasuke muttered bitterly, your will of fire? It doesn't even exist. Hiruzen took it all with a hard face and mourned the loss of respect from this boy who had once regarded him with awe. I'm sorry, Sasuke. The Hokage said, making eye contact with him, refusing to back down from an apology. Sasuke didn't acknowledge it, but he sat down again and shut his eyes tightly. Who killed Shisui? Sasuke asked through gritted teeth. Hiruzen knew the truth now. He knew what had happened that night at Naka River. Itachi had told him, and Hiruzen couldn't not trust his word after all the boy had done for Konoha. He killed himself. Sasuke let out an agitated breath again, and Inoichi asked softly, "What are you feeling right now?" Sasuke ignored him. Why did he do that? Because he believed it was the best course of action. A village elder was behind his eyes. They had a special ability, and said elder had already acquired one of his eyes. The other one he handed to your brother, and then he threw himself into the Naka River. Sasuke's eyes opened, and the Sharingan was still spinning madly, but they looked a little different now, a darker red, sharper tomos. There were telltale signs of tears in them, and Sasuke kept them at bay. This elder. What happened to him? Is he dead? Hiruzen hesitated and didn't give an answer, so Sasuke turned his attention to the Sannin, who had failed to say even one word throughout the entire meeting. What happened to him? Jiraiya shook his head. He's still alive. We didn't know the extent of his crimes until now. What is his name? Danzo Shimura. Hiruzen said with almost aching feel to it. Sasuke bit his lip, and all of them could feel the killing intent that flowed out of him unrestrained. I will kill him, he decided. Sasuke. Inoichi began, and this time the boy listened. Please don't do anything drastic. We are working towards bringing this man to justice. He's just too well protected right now. If the information we have proves true, it's likely that Danzo has a small army at his command, and any action to bring him down individually will only result in your death. I know we adults have no right to ask this of you, but please have some faith in us. I promise you that I won't sit back until I've seen Danzo's head rolling on the floor. Sasuke grunted but said nothing to assure the man that he was convinced by those words. So Itachi was ordered to kill the clan. And he accepted this mission. He did. Hiruzen said quietly, I want you to know that Itachi loved you. He still does. He fought tooth and nail to keep you alive. He was ordered to kill everyone, including you, but he refused to do so. He's been protecting you, Sasuke. No, he's not. Sasuke replied firmly, but I have to wish to discuss this further with you. I just want answers. Did you order him to join the Akatsuki too then? Yes, Hiruzen answered promptly. To spy on the Akatsuki and give us intel on the inner workings of the terrorist organization. All right. Did you order him to torture me with Tsukuyomi the night of the massacre? Hiruzen's head creased into a small frown. No, I did not. Did you order him to tell me to pursue revenge against him? I didn't. Did you order him to plant ideas into my head? To tell me to get Mangekyo Sharingan by killing my goddamn best friend? No, Sasuke. Why are you asking me this? Because you seem to believe that my brother did no wrong. That I should forgive him and accept him. But you have no clue the shit Itachi's pulled all these years. No clue. Hiruzen didn't rub his temples. He didn't sigh. But he just looked at this young man, and he knew no amount of regret could ever make things right. He couldn't magically fix this twisted relationship between the two brothers. Are we done here? Sasuke said coolly, or do you have another layer of secrets that you wish to keep from me for another decade? No, that's it, Hiruzen replied, wishing for this to be over as much as Sasuke did. Good then. I'll be taking my leave. He stood up, and walked towards the door. Fisted hands by his side and shoulders taut. Sasuke, Hiruzen couldn't help but call out, and he was grateful that the boy did halt to hear these words. Itachi did do some things that were horrible, but he is, a good man. Sasuke snorted, bitter through and through. No, he's not a good man, Sarutobi, but you're even worse, and I'm glad really. He twisted the door's handle and stepped outside, that you won't be my Hokage for much longer. Hiruzen couldn't help but agree. Chapter 32, Family. Temari had always been a distrustful individual. It was how she grew up, a house full of tension, forever waiting for the calm to stop and the storm to begin. More often than not, the storm did begin, and she was left with no support, coupled with the responsibility of looking after her siblings as the eldest of them. But she could never really protect Gaara like she thought she should have. After all, her brother was always the cause of conflict. She'd seen the blood that stained his tunic when he was just a 5-year-old child, and something had shifted within her that night. Something had tainted her love for him. Their relationship moving forward was incredibly strained, and it had even escalated to blows a couple times. Kankuro was the only person keeping her sane and afloat as her familial life went to hell. But he was just as troubled as she was, and they could only hope for some miracle to give them their brother back, their baby brother with chubby cheeks and innocent eyes, the brother who had love carved on his forehead and his heart. Gaara hadn't always been the monster they'd come to look at him as. He'd been a shy kid with a crooked smile who liked to make sand castles and throw the grains into Mary's hair. Something had happened to him. Slowly and gradually Gaara's sanity was ripped away from him right before Tamari's eyes, and she could only stand and watch in horror. Now Tamari had this hope which was turning more solid from fragile. Gaara had changed. He truly had. Or maybe he was just returning to his true self. Whatever had happened between him and that Uzumaki she didn't know. But she was grateful for it. So when that evening his brother walked into their home, looked at both of them and smiled, a real fucking smile, Tamari knew that even though they had a lot to work on, they'd be okay. They'd be fine. Then her little brother went to his room and maybe after a whole decade of insomnia, went to sleep. He looked so damn peaceful that Tamari and Kankuro just stood outside the threshold of his room and stared at Gaara's sleeping form with an overwhelming amount of fondness. Yes, Tamari decided, they'd be perfectly fine now. Get a shovel, Sakura hissed at Ino, the moment I find that bastard, I'm burying him alive. The blonde's lips twitched upwards, but she blocked Sakura from going any further. Calm down, she said in the best soothing tone she knew, you've already done 2 rounds of Konoha. This isn't helping. Sakura threw her a sour look and stubbornly refused to back down. In return, Ino gripped Sakura's arms so she couldn't jump away and begin her frantic search anew. You're being ridiculous, Ino chided. Besides, Sasuke isn't some toddler who got lost. He's a grown-ass teenager who has months of experience at being a competent shinobi. Let him be responsible for his own health, will you? Didn't he tell you to trust him? He did, Sakura groaned, as she pulled her arms away from her friend's loosening grip, but it's difficult, okay? I don't want him to do something that he'll regret. Ino pondered over Sakura's words for a bit before deciding that this was all utterly stupid. This is so annoying, she glared at Sakura. You won't stop worrying about Sasuke and that idiot won't stop being elusive. Ah. Fine. Come on, let's go all around Konoha once again. Sakura relaxed at that and gave a small smile to Ino, aware that the blonde wasn't usually as easy to convince. Yet Ino was willing to just be there for Sakura while she figured out how she could be there for someone else that she held dear to herself. Park first. She questioned and took to the roofs at Ino's affirmative response. Sasuke better be alright or Sakura was sure that she'd end up murdering someone. Shikamaru was extremely pissed. Really, the Nara was positively livid, but his exhaustion and laziness prevented him from expressing his rage in an appropriately grand manner. Instead, he glared silently at the trees surrounding Konoha and sulked. Sorry, Naruto said, exasperated. But you really should have expected the journey back to be long. I had, Shikamaru said dryly, but I hadn't taken into account your insane urge to make a straight run for Konoha. For fuck's sake, why couldn't we have taken a break? I don't know, Naruto mumbled, just didn't think it was a good idea for Itaki and Kisame to be sentenced without our verbal accounts of the events, you know. Shikamaru sighed, we weren't the only reliable witnesses there. Besides, if our testimonies were that important, the Hokage would just delay the judgment. You don't need to worry about those rogue nins at all. Naruto shrugged, that strange feeling in his gut that had been there the whole of yesterday returning back. It's not Itaki and Kisame that I'm worried about. Shikamaru let the matter drop, recognizing that Naruto was in one of his paranoid moods and nothing could deter the blonde from doing what he wanted right now. Best to go along with him and see where that lands him. Fine, but you're still playing that promised Shoujin match with me. At that, a tiny smile broke out on Naruto's face that made Shikamaru strangely happy. Absolutely. ________________________________________________________________________________________________________________________ It was almost sunset by the time the duo of Chunin returned to Konoha, and immediately Shikamaru's eyes fall on Ino, whose face looked red with strain and she was panting heavily while huffing with her hands on her knees. He raised an eyebrow at Sakura, who was standing beside his ex-teammate with an equally exhausted look. Well, he could totally relate with that at the moment. Sakura caught his eye and then Naruto's, after which she was before them in an instant, hands waving wide and words coming out faster than the two boys could comprehend it. Relax. Naruto immediately took control of the situation, one hand tapping lightly on Sakura's shoulder. Calm down, alright Sakura? We're here, we'll listen. Just try to control your breathing. Sakura understood that she had to steady herself, so she closed her eyes and let the feeling of calmness engulf her while she felt the added warmth of Ino's palm on her other shoulder. Okay, she took in a shaky breath. Fine. Okay. Awesome. I'm fine, now. Thanks guys. I'm fine. Naruto nodded and pulled his hand away, though a frown was evident on his face. So, he looked at the two girls. Mind explaining what this is all about? Sasuke, Sakura replied, chewing the inside of her cheek, her nervous tick. We can't find him. Elaborate, will you? Shikamaru jumped into the conversation. He was called for a private meeting with the Hokage yesterday afternoon. I wanted to go with him, but he was stubborn to go alone and I let him. Sakura sighed, wiping her sweaty palms on the battle dress she wore. He didn't return last night, He had slept at my place the night we returned from the mission and he'd promised to come back and gather his belongings. So, I immediately knew something was wrong when he didn't come. I started searching, right? I didn't find him, so I thought, okay, he's probably gone to his apartment instead and will come back tomorrow or something. He didn't. So I went straight to Ino and we've been searching the whole of Konoha for him. Like we've been to all the possible places Sasuke could be at least twice now and we still can't locate him. Oh, Naruto blinked after the Sakura's frantic tirade was over. Any idea what the Hokage had called him in for? Sakura frowned, thinking about the possibilities. Perhaps something about Itachi. Sakura looked at Shikamaru. I mean, there's nothing else that could require the Hokage to have a personal chat with him, right? The Nara hummed and thought, yes, that's the most likely reason. But I doubt it was about the mission of Itachi's sentence. The Hokage, even at his discretion, wouldn't consult or involve a Chunin in the judgment-making process. At least not for a case as high-profiled as Itachi's. It doesn't matter that Sasuke is Itachi's brother. It has to be something else we don't know of. Oh, Naruto said again, as if he wasn't really paying attention to what was being said around him. Oh fuck. Naruto, Shikamaru said, touching the dazed blonde's arm, what happened? Did you realize something? Naruto shook his head, having come out of his thoughts. He smiled at them, a wavering sort of smile but confident nonetheless. Nah, he waved a dismissive hand, don't worry about it. Sasuke will be fine. How do you know that? Ino asked, dubious and doubtful. Naruto shrugged before moving away from the huddle they'd found themselves in. I just do. Where are you going? Shikamaru asked as he saw Naruto making his way into the village proper. Got an urgent errand to run. He lied and the other realized it immediately, but they also knew Naruto was aware of it. Like I said though, don't worry about Sasuke. He'll be alright. With that, Naruto was gone, mixed in with the citizens of Konoha that crowded the Konohan market. I guess that's that, Shikamaru said. Sakura groaned, he didn't even tell us anything. How am I supposed to just take his word and accept it? The Nara yawned, and rolled his shoulders to get the lethargy out of them. He was your teammate, wasn't he? Sakura nodded, unsure of where Shikamaru was going with this. Right. So you should know that simply trusting Naruto is the best thing you can do sometimes. And this is one of those times. Shikamaru's smile was a lazy stretch of his lips. Definitely. The river flowed calmly, a stark contrast to the raging stream of Sasuke's thoughts. He dangled his feet beneath the edge, his toes sticking into the cool water. Years ago, he'd whined to his mother about how his small feet didn't reach the surface of the lake, and even that sliver of memory only served to sadden Sasuke further. He gazed at the sun setting below the horizon, and in a distant part of his brain, the part which was still unaffected by the clusterfuck of revelations, he took note of the fact that he was incredibly hungry right now. He shrugged it off almost instantly and pushed himself further towards the edge of the bank, minute shivers running up his legs as they were exposed to the chilly air. Oi! Naruto's voice was faux casual, but Sasuke was too busy staring at the waters to notice it. I'm back, Sasuke-kun. What's up? Sasuke didn't respond, but he also didn't stop Naruto from hopping down beside him and similarly dangling his feet in the river. Naruto nudged Sasuke with his shoulder, eyes kept purposely on the sky. What's up? He asked again, softer this time. Sasuke sighed and shook his head slightly. Nothing for you to bother about. That's for me to decide, Naruto replied smoothly. So, will you tell what happened or not? Of course, Naruto was well aware of what had happened. There really was only one possible scenario here. He should have known Hiruzen would pull something like this honestly. Now, Naruto just hoped that the old cage had at least softened the blow. But even if he knew that the truth of Itachi was now known by Sasuke, he wasn't going to admit it. He would only speak of the matter if Sasuke wanted to talk and open up about it. If the Uchiha wasn't ready to share his feelings, then Naruto wasn't going to push it, well, at least not after the initial attempts at persuasion. I hate Itachi, Sasuke whispered, voice bland like it had been in the years following the massacre. Naruto just nodded, and stayed silent while Sasuke decided whether he should spill his guts or jump into the river. I hate Itachi, Sasuke repeated again, but I'm not sure what hate means to me anymore. Okay, Naruto said quietly, not wanting to ruin the peaceful atmosphere they'd found themselves in. You have plenty of time to sort out your feelings. Take your time. Sasuke gulped then, the water suddenly feeling too cold to bear. He pulled his feet up and tucked them below his thighs as he sat in a meditative pose. His hands fisted automatically and his Chunin vest felt too restrictive and tight. And in that moment of discomfort, he decided that he needed an outlet for all of this. He didn't kill my clan to test his strength, he spoke as if he was talking to his own self. He killed them because he was ordered to. And surprisingly, Naruto just believed him. The blonde just believed his words without so much as a skeptical look. Who ordered him? The Hokage. Naruto asked, because he wasn't really supposed to know this stuff. Sasuke's jaw clenched and his carded his fingers roughly through his disheveled hair. The elders did. But the Hokage, he didn't even fucking stop them. I don't get it. How could they just? Naruto's arm was pressed against Sasuke's now while the blonde's eyes still stayed on the dark orange of the sky. Soon, it'd be dark. I don't know, Naruto. I don't know how to feel, and that sucks because some part of me wants to go to Itachi right now and hug that stupid bastard, but another part of me wants to forget him, break any and all ties with him and get rid of him altogether. Think of him as a nightmare that I've finally woken up from. I get it. Naruto's smile was wry and sad. Sometimes, people hurt you, and even when things get better, even when the people had good intentions, the damage is done. And it's so thorough that you can never look past it. Sasuke slowly unwrapped his legs from underneath his butt and dipped them back into the water. He shifted closer to his confidant, the friend who was more or less keeping him sane. Won't ask me why was Itachi given such an order? Sasuke questioned. Just gonna do your annoying empathy bullshit. Naruto shrugged, a small grin on his face. Nope, his voice was cheery despite everything, I don't need to ask those questions right now. Suit yourself, Sasuke replied, can I bitch more about Itachi then? Naruto looked at Sasuke, his grin widening to meet his eyes. Go on, I'm all ears. Till late that night, the two boys who were brothers in all but blood sat by the riverside where once they'd denied their bond of friendship. They sat, one talked, and one listened. And even if things got a little emotional, then crazy, then emotional again, none of them would mention it the next morning. Sasuke felt himself relaxing bit by bit as he ranted in a small, frustrated voice about Itachi and the Hokage and that guy, Danzo, to Naruto. His thoughts entangled themselves even as he spilled out a jumble of almost indecipherable words. Talking about his feelings was hard, he knew that. But by the time the moon was hanging high in the sky, he also knew that there was some significant wisdom behind the whole let it all out thing. It was a little past midnight when a yawn escaped Naruto's lips and Sasuke's droopy eyes drooped even further. I think we should get going. The blonde said, eyeing Sasuke's uncharacteristically lax posture with amusement. The Uchiha rarely ever untensed, and seeing him so calm and relaxed sent a wave of fondness within Naruto. Yeah, Sasuke muttered, as he stood up with Naruto, I'm so damn tired. You didn't sleep last night, did you? No, Sasuke said, walking towards the road. For some reason, I thought it would be a wonderful idea to go to my clan's compound yesterday. Turns out, I've still got some trauma left from the massacre. Who knew? Naruto smiled. It was good to see some humor back in his friend, never mind the morbidness of it all. Dumbass, Naruto mumbled before stopping and frowning at Sasuke's back. Hey Sasuke, Naruto called out, and the Uchiha halted to look at him. You know that even if Itachi asks for forgiveness you don't have to forgive him, right? Sasuke held Naruto's gaze for an intense moment or two before snorting. Yes, I do. He turned his head again and continued walking. Now come on before I fucking faint on the middle of the street. Naruto was perfectly happy to fall in step beside Sasuke, just like countless times before. Chapter 33, Hokage. When the Konohan populace was ushered to the assembly area that day, none of the citizens or shinobi had any idea of how the upcoming revelations would shake them to their very cores. The Uchiha massacre was a planned event that I, along with the village elders, are responsible for. A hush fell over the entire gathering, several thousand men and women standing with their mouths agape. Some cried silently upon realizing the horrific catastrophe was organized, negotiated, and designed. Some felt righteous anger bubbling within them and shouted their disdain for their leader. Only a few recognized that this action wouldn't have been taken if they themselves had been more accepting of the Uchiha clan, but they were a minority, and not a very vocal one at that. I can't believe this, Sakura whispered, troubled and shaken up. What the fuck? I'm not even surprised, Shikamaru commented, something present in his eyes apart from boredom. My father had many stories to share with me, and even more for my mother. Our village isn't all that virtuous and good and pure as you might think it is. The pink-haired girl gulped, confusion clearing up to give way to anger. It's a good thing I never respected the village elders in the first place. But for the Hokage too, guess that's another person to add to my list of people who have disappointed me. Shikamaru didn't pry about who else was there in that list and continued to listen to Hiruzen Sarutobi's grief and remorse-filled speech, him owning up to his mistakes and inaction. His eyes lingered to his left, where upon an elevated area Naruto stood beside Jiraiya. The blonde was talking in hushed tones with his mentor, and when he caught Shikamaru's eyes, he gave the Nara a solemn, thin smile. Naruto knew that even if Shikamaru didn't show it, he was affected by this news as much as the rest of Konoha. Someone in the audience shouted profanities when Hiruzen informed that Itachi Uchiha would be forgiven for his crimes, which weren't even crimes in all actuality, and reinstated in the Shinobi Corps if the Uchiha so wished. He's not to be blamed for the mistakes of others, Hiruzen said, so sad and so serious. He was 13, and he was a soldier who did as he was ordered to. Fuck off. The man who owned the dairy 2 blocks away from the Uchiha compound yelled, that boy's a psycho. I saw the blood in that place. No sane person can just kill his kin even if he was ordered to. Hiruzen raised his hand to stop the Umbu guards moving towards the civilian. I understand your point of view, Hotaru-san, but now, please, I request all of you to understand mine. You don't know this boy, don't know his fierce loyalty to our village, don't know the lengths he would go to keep you, all of you, safe. You think he slaughtered his clan because he enjoyed that task? Use your heads, I urge. He had to do this gruesome job so someone else wouldn't have to. He did it so civil war wouldn't threaten Konoha's peace. He did it so all of you citizens could sleep at night without the threat of your neighbor lighting your house on fire. Another round of silence ensued in the central grounds of Konoha. No one dared to speak lest the fragile truce break. Their cage was all but an old man who'd done terrible mistakes to them now. Not the god of shinobi they'd revered once. Displeasure spread amongst the people of Konoha, but they understood somehow that this truth wasn't meant to be kept tucked inside some box. It was meant to be unleashed and accepted. No matter the time it would take to heal the cracks in the trust between them and the authorities. I, in good conscience, cannot continue to be the cage of Konoha after all the damage I've caused her people. Hiruzen's voice was unwavering this time. It didn't hold the fragility of a scandalous confession but the rigidity of a sincere apology. So I hereby resign formally. Someone let out a whoop of joy. Dash from my post as the Hokage end, he paused and looked behind himself. Someone stepped onto the tower's roof and Hiruzen turned back towards the people, smiled and continued. I pass on the duties and title of the 5th Hokage to Tsunade Senju, daughter of the Shodai and one of the legendary Sunin. Now, this was another development most people weren't expecting. Tsunade's return to the village had been quiet and under the wraps, and apart from the squads that met her during Itaki and Kisame's arrest, the Jounin commander and the Hokage, no one else was aware of her presence. Nonetheless, most of people were quick to approve of this move. Tsunade had always been vastly trusted by the villagers, as someone who healed and someone whose monstrous strength evoked fear in enemies who heard her name. She was a wise woman too, experienced and of a diplomatic mind. A few, however, questioned the rationality of this decision. Partly because it was made by the third, whom they didn't trust anymore, and partly because they'd heard tales of Tsunade's descent to alcoholism and gambling. In days to come, these few would send in petitions and requests to meet with Tsunade, to assess her credibility and worth, and would get a couch thrown at them for their troubles. Luckily, these few would see the furniture throwing as a testament of Tsunade's reliability and promptly cease their protesting. The Sunin in question right now walked up to the rails and accepted the hat with a begrudging resignation. She waved at the assembly without a smile on a face, leaned her hands on the railing, and gave everyone below an intense look. I'm here to change Konoha. For better or for worse. No one knew, but they all agreed that her leadership would be an upgrade as compared to Sarutobi's. The announcements now made, a band of musicians played a random tune while everyone dispersed. The whispers and rumors and talks of disgust and anger wouldn't stop for weeks to come as each individual pondered over these dark truths of Konoha. But most would agree that Konoha was set for progress now. This newfound transparency in governance was a definite plus, no matter the circumstances that forced it out. It was quite boring, Sakura said when Sasuke asked her how the meet went. The Uchiha had opted out of attending it, and none of his friends had asked why. Sasuke raised a brow, so no earth-shattering declarations today. Sakura sat on the chair, feet dangling below the table in Sasuke's kitchen. Those were there, but honestly, the most eventful part of the morning was Tsunade-sama's appointment. Sakura knew what Sasuke's meeting with the Hokages had been about. It was easy to connect the dots. But she had no wish to mess with healing wounds, and bringing up the topic of Itaka was sure to do just that. Surprisingly, it was Sasuke that brought it up himself. I'm going to visit him. He's being kept at the tower for now. Sakura didn't let her shock show on her face and nodded her head, all right. Are you ready for that though? Sasuke sat across from her and closed his eyes. No, far from it, he jerked his head a bit, but I know I'll never be ready for this either. No point stalling, right? Right, Sakura smiled, a wobbly curve, and rested her palm on Sasuke's strained fist. You'll be fine. Sasuke's eyes opened and he didn't pull away his fist like Sakura had thought he would. His face remained blank, but this conversation was enough to prove his inner turmoil still prevailed. Could you accompany me? Sakura frowned in confusion. Where to? To see Itaki. Sasuke finally retracted his hand. Just need to keep my shit together, and I don't know, you keep me calm and I like you're okay. Sorry, I don't know what I'm saying dash. Sakura's giggle followed by her laughter cut short Sasuke's uncharacteristic ramble. Of course, Sakura said, smiling, I'll come with. But right now, I really gotta go. Promised Hinata that we'd, stalk Tsunade-sama together. Sasuke's pink cheeks were left unacknowledged by both parties involved, and he briskly walked Sakura to the door. See you later, I guess. Sasuke said in parting. Later, Sakura promised. Shikaku's life had just taken a turn for the worse. Not only was he the senior advisor assigned to the new Hokage, but he also had to manage the duties of the Jounin commander, and so he was pissed. Shut the fuck up, he finally growled, slapping the stack of papers he held onto the desk. He had no idea when he'd acquired this new penchant for dramatics, but his subordinates immediately quit, and so he wasn't complaining. No idle commentary, he warned, giving a stern look to Radu and Asuma, who just nodded with lazy grins on their faces. I'm still finalizing the plans with Jiraiya-san and Hokage-sama. The infiltrator with en route last sent in updates 2 days ago and we're waiting for his reply. He proceeded to sit on the desk, eyeing all these jounin, the elite group of shinobi standing before him with scrutiny. This mission will not be easy, his voice carried a severity that didn't go unnoticed by anyone standing in the room. I'm prepared to face casualties, but fatalities? They're quite possible too. Way too possible, in fact. Kakashi narrowed his eyes at his leader but continued to read the words of his new Ika book. No one batted an eye at his inappropriate behavior, they were all aware of each other's quirks and too weary for being judgmental anymore. It's not an ambush. We won't have an upper hand. It's a head-on attack, with organized groups targeting different points in Danzo's base. The only advantage we have is the element of surprise, which will wear off quickly because Danzo's got seals all over his hideout. Shikaku sighed, rubbing his forehead. Ideally, we wouldn't want you all to kill any of the root members. It isn't their fault they were weaponized by that bastard after all. But subduing them without taking their lives is very difficult, and I'm sure you know that. So, after discussing this with Tsunade-sama at length, we've approved of a solution that came to us by luck. Hurry up then, Anko rolled her eyes, just spit it. Shikaku refused to spend any more energy at giving an annoyed reaction. He continued. 2 weeks ago, during the Hokage appointment ceremony, Kisame Hoshigaki went on, let's say, a rampage in his cell. We needed something beyond chakra suppression cuffs to keep him still. The prison management head contacted Jiraiya, as he was the one who'd officially handed the prisoner to them. Jiraiya-san was in company of a Chunin when this information was brought to him, and said Chunin informed Jiraiya-san of a seal he'd been working on. A paralysis seal. Long story short, Jiraiya-san completed the seal, fixed holes and mistakes, and the array is being mass-produced right now by our developers as we speak. Awesome, Reita muttered and was promptly hit on his head by Kurane. Kakashi chuckled for some reason and only Shikaku understood why. So, do I need to spell it all for you, or do you all understand what these seals will be used for? A collective round of head nods assured the commander that these jounins still had their brains intact. Great, he hopped off the desk and picked up the papers again. Fuck off then. Staring at your dumb faces is boring me. As the jounin moved outside, they showed none of the apprehension they felt. Taking down Danzo would come at a cost if they weren't careful. But for them, any cost would be worth putting a stop to the despicable man that Danzo had now become. Naruto and Shikamaru were sparring in the academy grounds after another one of their teaching missions when Inoichi's missive reached them. They were both summoned by the man, who had formally invited them for a meeting to the TNI department that afternoon. Don't tell me he wants to question us again about Itaki and Kisame, Naruto muttered, because that was very tedious. Shikamaru sipped some water, his throat dry after the rigorous training. Hope not, he replied, I slept through most of it the first time around. Naruto shouted a quick goodbye to Kano Amaru and his gang, following Shikamaru out the academy gates. You sleep through most of your life, Shika. This is nothing new. Shikamaru made a show of considering what was said. You're right, he agreed, but that's true only cause life itself is goddamn boring. Nah, Naruto said with a strange sort of reminiscent grin, life's pretty interesting now. Now? Shikamaru queried, hadn't been before? Thought you always had this optimistic outlook. I did, Naruto shrugged, and still do. Just sometime along the way, I wasn't so sure. Anyway, enough of this philosophical bullshit for today. What are Ino and Chuji doing these days? Shikamaru snorted, Ino's been dragging Chuji to train every single day. Asuma's so tired of her enthusiasm. She wants to participate in the Chunin exams 5 months hence. Naruto smiled, that's honestly good to hear. Hinata's team has also been training, but they've been dispatched for 2 C ranks after the finals already. They're well on their way to become the best tracking team we've got. Kiba's grumpy though because Akamaru still likes Shino's head scratches better than his. Shikamaru shook his head in amusement, why is everyone from the Rookie 9 so stupid? Naruto nudged him playfully, hey, you realize you're a part of the rookies, right? Shikamaru didn't take back his words. He shrugged, nonchalant. And? Who says I'm not stupid? It was a joke, and maybe that was what surprised Naruto so much. The Shikamaru he'd known, and come to respect from his time, had been so similar to this one but so different too. That Shikamaru had prided his genius, his strategic ability and his undeniable wit. This Shikamaru was more humbled, more aware of his flaws, and maybe that was the moment when Naruto really felt that yes, this person was simply awesome. Someone Naruto respected, cherished, and valued. I like the gray paint, Shikamaru spoke upon reaching the TNI building. It's depressing, Naruto said, but the high ceilings make up for it. Stepping inside, the two boys found their way to the head's office after asking around a bit. Their missive was clutched in front of them like a pass to show to any suspicious and paranoid shinobi that they were here on official business. Welcome, Inoichi gave them a sweet, warm smile when they entered. Have a seat. And that's also when both of them knew with certainty that Ino's father was up to the same level of chaos that Ino often caused. All their predictions held true when the TNI head leaned forward, hands clasped together, and asked. So boys, how would you like to join Konoha's torture and interrogation force? Chapter 34, Intel. Inoichi tried to gauge the reactions of the two boys, but apart from the slight widening of their eyes, they didn't give any of their thoughts away. Good, he thought, being too expressive won't do them any favors in TNI. Why? Shikamaru asked, slumping into the chair. He was prepared for this conversation to be a long one. Why am I extending this offer to you? Contrasting Shikamaru's posture, Naruto propped his head on his palms and laid his elbows on the desk. His face mostly remained blank as he replied. Yes. I don't see what's your reasoning here at all. Inoichi hummed and pulled out 2 sheets of paper from his drawer. Laying them flat on his table, he urged the boys to read the contents of the documents. This one, he pointed at the sheet kept before Naruto, is the apprenticeship request Jiraiya-san sent in for you 2 weeks ago. He's our village's spy master, and you definitely know this already. He works in tandem with the Intel division. His work is mostly independent and he's been maintaining direct correspondence with the Hokage, but he still answers to our Intel head from time to time. Inoichi let the information sink in and got a nod from Naruto to carry on. He turned his gaze to the paper held by Shikamaru then. And that is the recruitment request by the analysis department for you, Shikamaru. They'd wanted you to work for them ever since you became genin, but you were too inexperienced and we couldn't allow anyone into any branches of the Intel division without some field experience. Now though, you two at least clear the basic criteria to be offered these positions. Naruto didn't know what to think of this. In his original timeline, Jiraiya had never so much as suggested that Naruto learn his craft of spying and information gathering. He understood the logic behind it too. Naruto hadn't been very subtle as a genin and he didn't have any secretive bone in his body even by the age of 15. He could accept that he'd changed since then. The war in his Hokageship had inculcated an interest towards quieter, peaceful jobs in him despite his fondness for combat. On the other hand, Shikamaru wasn't all that surprised by this information. His father had always made it a point to nudge him in the direction of the analysis team. Apart from being Jounin commander, Shikaka was also a long-standing member of the analysis department, even been its head for a few years in his 3 decades-long career. After observing similar interests in his son, he'd thought it best for Shikamaru to also join this department, and the current head had been more than happy to follow through with Shikaku's suggestions. Cool, the Nara muttered, glancing at the modest salary this job would provide him. He looked at Inoichi then, folding the sheet and tucking it in his vest pocket. So why exactly would we join TNI when we've been approached for jobs more suited for us? Naruto already knew the answer to this, but he put on a slightly curious expression nonetheless. Inoichi smiled at them as if it was a joy to fill ignorant rookies about important matters of the village. It isn't a this or that choice as you seem to believe, the Yamanaka ran a hand through his long ponytail. Joining the TNI and undergoing basic training here is a necessity if you wish to join the Intel division at all. As you two may know, the Intel division has 2 departments under it, though both of them retain a lot of autonomy for their working. They are the TNI and the analysis departments. We, at the TNI, use interrogation and torture, along with mind arts, to gather intel. Sometimes it's straightforward and the information is sent directly to the Intel division to process, document and store. Other times, it's a code or some cryptic message we receive, in which case we throw it at the analysis team that decodes that message, which is then sent to the ID. Sounds simple enough, right? It is, for the most case. There are complications, but you'll only learn how to cope with them through hands-on experience. Naruto considered these words with utmost seriousness. This felt like undergoing some weird form of career counseling where the person behind the desk was actually providing relevant information for a change. Shikamaru nodded along at some parts. Those were tidbits he knew about from shogi conversations with his father. Playing the game always made Shikaku a little loose-lipped. "Alright," Shikamaru commented, straightening up, "what's this basic training supposed to be teaching us?" "You know, the usual stuff." Inoichi replied, but anyone from a mile away could spot the smirk he made no effort to hide. He jerked his head towards Naruto. "For you, it'll be things like how to interrogate someone, use intimidation as a tool to extract information, manipulate someone to slip a piece of important intel. If you ever work as a spy, you'll come in contact with your targets from whom you'll be getting valuable knowledge. Being subtle about it is the way to go. You don't want them to know that they're actually telling you something important. So, torture is usually the last resort. Nevertheless, you'll learn some of those methods too." That was a little concerning, but Naruto didn't fret too much about it. If he did his job well, it would never come to torture. He doubted he'd be able to do it, though if the stakes were high enough, he'd grit his teeth, fist his palms and carry out his duty. Inoichi addressed the Nara then, "You'll be learning most of these interrogation tactics too. Solely, to resist them and not fall for them. Bring a decoder will mean that you'll have a target on your back, and for good reason. The info you can come across during your job can put Konoha in peril if it falls into the enemy's hands. Torture resistance is something you'll go through eventually, but as a newbie you won't be allowed to let in on very important matters, so the chances of an IWA torturing you for the location of our Umbu bases is stupid because you don't know it, and while IWA may have a bunch of assholes in their forces, they're not exactly dumb." Inoichi sighed, all the talking making him bored. His mind itched to invade another's, but he had to get through this meeting responsibly. So he continued. "Both of you will learn how to code messages, in reading and in speaking. Anyone in the Intel division knows our little saying, look for what they don't say what you don't mean. Keep the shit you know to yourself and weaponize the intel you gather. Share your knowledge sparingly." Inoichi rubbed his neck. "That's enough advice and talk for today. To conclude, you two gotta tell me if you are up for joining TNI for the next 6 months. You'll be put through the ringer and get crash courses on various topics every week. It'll be tough, and it'll be a bit like living in hell, but once you've passed the training, you'll have secured an excellent job or an apprenticeship under a fucking sun, and so I'd say the pain is worth the gain. I'll be assigning you basic tasks and odd jobs while you go through the training too, get some D-rank mission money that way. You'd still be required to work on field missions once a month, but that's it. Most of it is just constant learning and honing of your minds. Can we sleep on it?" Naruto asked. Inoichi rolled his eyes. "You Chunin and your overthinking brains. Just make a goddamn decision right now. Thinking for a night won't magically provide you with some great insight." Shikamaru chuckled. "If I'll have to do so much on-the-spot thinking in TNI, I'm up for it." He leaned forward. "My answer's a yes. I accept the training and the subsequent recruitment offer." Naruto groaned. "So you didn't even speak with your parents or your team or your sensei for advice? Just went ahead and did the Nara equivalent of a hug with the TNI department?" Shikamaru shrugged. "What's there to think about? The analysis department is just where I wanted to end up, and so this is nothing short of a golden opportunity, and I have sufficient foresight to not let it go." Naruto didn't pout, but it was close. He was in a dilemma, and he'd come to hate those. While joining the Intel division would provide him access to a lot of information, and hence help him keep track of the Akatsuki, it would also take him away from a lot of the forefront fighting. "I'm from an assault team," he spoke up. "And I'm damn good at it. So why do you think I'll be better doing covert spy missions than battling shinobi who threaten us?" Inoichi raised both his brows at him as if Naruto was being particularly dense. "Your master is Jiraiya, one of the Chunin, the most powerful team of his generation, and you're still asking me this question? Spying on enemy nations comes with huge, very huge risks. Sometimes, you will have to put an end to a threat that would cause too much damage if it's left idle. Other times, you'll have to fight your way out if you're discovered. Why do you think Jiraiya is so good at what he does? He's not only discreet but also capable of winning against the plenty of foes that come his way. Well, that made some sense. Naruto thought for a bit and Shikamaru and Inoichi stayed thankfully silent. After a good 5 minutes, Naruto hit his head on the table, sure that this decision would be one he'd soon regret. Fine, he huffed into the wood, much to the amusement of Inoichi. I'm in. But if you teach me how to properly peep at women in bathhouses as a tactic of information gathering, I swear to Kami I'll kill you. Inoichi gave a short, hearty laugh. Already threatening your boss? I'm gonna have so much fun making your life difficult, Naruto. Naruto looked up again, giving Inoichi an intense stare. I don't like you very much, Chief. Inoichi gave him a nice, sunny smile. You'll also come to hate me very soon. We're so stupid, Naruto whispered the moment they were out of the TNI building. Shikamaru snorted. Seeing Naruto so discomposed and mortified wasn't a daily occurrence and he was enjoying every moment of it. You're overreacting, he stated flatly. Inoichi-san just has a flair for dramatics and likes to present the front of sadist to keep his rep. Have you ever seen him with Ino? He's a total papa bear. Ino's puppy dog eyes are his greatest weakness. So don't fall for his scary side. He's a softie. Naruto shoved his hands in his pockets. I know. But he's too good at faking it, okay? Like why did his ink brush have a knife end? How does he not cut his palm every time he uses it? Why can't any jounin in Konoha be sane and normal? The Nara chuckled, just calm down. We can handle Inoichi, trust me. Besides, this training is going to be fun, I won't have to handle those academy brats or border patrols anymore. What a sweet deal. True, Naruto replied, now a lot less agitated. But you'll now have to handle criminals or our very annoying enemies instead. Shikamaru waved his hand dismissively, passing threats of bodily harm while maintaining a poker face. That's piece of cake for me. I'll very much enjoy the process, don't worry. Naruto rolled his eyes, done with this conversation. He couldn't exactly share his other concerns with Shikamaru. At least, not right now. He'd always kept the Akatsuki in the back of his mind, a constant reminder of the war he had to prevent. His initial plan had been to eliminate as many members as he could before he'd left the village for training last time. Itaki and Kisame were out but that still left 7 of them. Jiraiya's apprenticeship meant he'd be leaving Konoha again to understand the Sannin's extensive spy network and get acquainted with his tasks as a part of it, but there was no promised combat training mentioned. Not that Naruto needed it anyway. He would be lying if he said he wasn't apprehensive of the future battles he'd have to fight against Pain and Obito and the rest of the Akatsuki, but he knew that he'd be more than ready to take them on when the time came. For now, he'd focus on the new direction his life had taken. His ambitions had long since abandoned any notion of becoming Hokage, and apart from prevent war, he didn't have anything particular he'd wanted to do. This offer from Jiraiya and the TNI had definitely been unexpected but not bad. Definitely not bad. Shit, Shikamaru said under his breath, pulling Naruto by the arm till they both crashed painfully against a wall. What was that? Naruto asked, squinting to see who Shikamaru was hiding from. It's my mom, the Nara said, scratching his head as he continued to peek at the woman. I promised I'd return to go shopping with her, but then all this happened and I forgot to send her a message that I'd be late. She's going to kill me tonight. Naruto looked at Shikamaru with sympathy. But it wasn't for any of the reasons the Nara thought. The blonde turned around, quick as an arrow, cupped his hands around his mouth and yelled. Yoshino-san. What a pleasant surprise to see you here. Shikamaru was just talking about how he used his intellect to get out of spending time is all he got out before Shikamaru kicked him hard on his back. But no amount of violence could stop the trouble that Shikamaru was now in. Asshole, Shikamaru muttered sourly as he saw his mom walk into the alleyway and towards him. Hello, son, she said with a lovely smile. Shikamaru knew what death looked like, in that moment. Underscore 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 underscore. I will be joining you, Hiruzen Sarutobi declared, looking straight into Shikaku's eyes, daring him to speak against him. Don't be stubborn, Tsunade replied sternly, rubbing her temples. You're retired, for fuck's sake. I won't allow you to go on a shinobi mission and put yourself and others in danger. Hiruzen smiled at his student, hollow and brittle. I may have lost everyone's respect, Tsunade. But I haven't lost the strength that made me the god of shinobi. Tsunade didn't refute the point. She was aware that Sensei could still defeat her if he went all out, but his request, or well, announcement, was just too insane to approve. Why can't you just enjoy your retirement? The fifth Hokage asked with exasperation, pouring a good amount of sake in her cup. I think I'll enjoy myself thoroughly in this mission, don't you worry. Shikaku coughed. If I may interject, Lord Third, Lord Fifth, the squads are already drafted and we have more than enough shinobi to take care of this task. Your assistance, while appreciated, will be unnecessary. Hiruzen chuckled. You think Danzo can be taken down by a couple jounin? They're the best ones we have. Hatake, Guy, Asuma, Yui, and the whole squad Gamma from Umbu plus Tenzo, they're all assigned to target Danzo. They'll kill him, I know they will. Hiruzen stayed silent for a moment, then a frown appeared on his forehead. Don't do that. Danzo's got many capable shinobi en route. Our elite jounin will be needed to take care of them. Danzo has 2 personal guards too, one's our spy, another's a real threat. Let Hatake and Guy handle him. I'll deal with Danzo with Tenzo and Asuma's assistance. Let me do this, Tsunade. The resolve in Hiruzen's eyes, the determination in his posture didn't surprise Tsunade. She knew he really wanted to do this. Maybe it was his way of atoning for his mistakes, to kill a former friend he'd let cause harm for far too long. Or maybe he just wanted the thrill of a fight again, to go down in battle. But what really caught her unawares was the desperation in her sensei's voice. Like this was a thing he absolutely had to do, no matter what. Well, it wasn't a decision she was happy about, but one she made because whether she openly acknowledged it or not, she owed her sensei this much. Okay, she said with gritted teeth, you're on the mission. Now both of you get out and let me enjoy my sake in peace. Hiruzen and Shikaku were more than happy to be dismissed. They walked in peaceful silence till the exit and parted ways after a goodbye. Hiruzen Sarutobi stood in the balcony of his respectable home with an air of satisfaction. He hadn't been the best leader, he could openly admit it. But he was born a fighter. And now, he was ready to die as one. Chapter 35, Cat's out of the bag. Coffee? Naruto asked with as much venom he could seep into his sickly sweet inquiry. Inoichi hid a smile behind his teeth and nodded slowly, taking as much time contemplating the specifics as he could. Yup, he finally verbalized his request for the beverage. A shot of milk and 1½ teaspoons of sugar. Please. The blonde shot his temporary boss an acidic look before marching out of the office briskly. In the corridors of the dull T&I department, he eyed all the glass windows lining individual workspaces. For a place that guarded information so well, the transparency of the workings of each member had been astounding to him. As it turned out, the first step in securing intel as a network is trust, and what's better at inspiring it than honesty and openness? He entered the little nook with marble countertops, and irritation flared inside him on seeing the plain, pristine coffee machine. For the last 2 weeks, he'd been nothing more than a wet behind the ears intern. From coffee runs to mundane documenting to taking Ibiki-san's pet cat out for a stroll in the green yard, Naruto had become a glorified maid. It wasn't that he was being exploited either. It was just typical newbie reception. Shikamaru was suffering the same fate as him, and though Naruto grumbled about their treatment now and then, the knowledge and skills he was being made to learn were undeniably useful. The first lecture about the inner workings of the entirety of the Intel Division had been interesting as much as it had been enlightening. He knew many facts already through his tenure as Hokage, but other things, the intricate network of spies they had, the methods of communication, the 5 different sets of hand signs for quick messages, the retrieval and conveyance of important information, it was all new and unknown, and Naruto found himself enjoying this process of being a student again. That, though, didn't stop him from shutting the lid onto the plastic holder of the machine any less forcefully, in hopes of breaking the damn thing. But like countless times before, the stupid machine held firm, whirring a soft noise as it brewed the caffeinated concoction for Naruto's dear senpai. Naruto. The voice was hesitant, soft, and old. Naruto turned around and for a moment, he considered how odd the man in front of him looked. The third's beard was gray, as were the scarce hair that crowned his head, a gray that perfectly matched the paint of the walls, in Naruto's humble opinion. The oddness emerged from the black and red shinobi garments instead of the Hokage robes that Hiruzen now adorned with a sense of duty and pride that Naruto had always found lacking in the old man when he sat behind his desk. Lord Third, Naruto acknowledged with a slight nod of his head, unsure of where he stood with him any longer. The familiarity that calling him Jiji would imply just felt wrong, but so did the formality of Lord Third. I see Inoichi's being a hard ass to you. That man's sadism is quite entertaining to behold, isn't it? Naruto snorted, angling his body so he could keep an eye on both, the retired Kage and the coffee-making abomination. Entertaining? Please, no. It's annoying and tiresome and wholly boring. The man's got an appetite for this poop drink the size of a chimp. You'll get used to it, Hiruzen said with a tinge of reminiscence. Besides, he'll start you onto more intense training next month so these measly chores will get cut short. Thank Kami, Naruto muttered, pouring in the thick black sludgy liquid into a tall cup and adding milk. Glancing at the various labeled containers, he purposely picked up the one with a neat script spelling out salt and adding 1½ teaspoons of the powdered stuff into the coffee. He smiled to himself and ignored the amused manner with which Hiruzen regarded him. Here to meet the boss? Naruto asked, titling his head in the general direction of Inoichi's personal office. Hiruzen joined him on his way back, easily keeping up with his fast strides. Yes, and Naruto wasn't surprised. He'd seen the old man once or twice before, lounging in the chair opposite Inoichi's, but before today, they hadn't had the chance to interact. How are you doing, Naruto? The blonde didn't falter, though it was close. The question wasn't as surprising as the weary tone in Hiruzen's voice. As if under all the prim and properness, the ramrod straight back, the clipped and tidy beard, he truly felt the weight of his age-old regrets, and Naruto knew he was one. One of Hiruzen's regrets. "I'm fine," he mumbled, quickening his pace to avoid this chat. "Perfectly fine." Hiruzen seemed to notice his discomfort, for he subtly stepped aside and slowed down. "I think I need to use the bathroom real quick," he said with a low chuckle. "Apparently old age can reduce bladder capacity, or so I've heard." Naruto peeped back, the cup feeling scalding in his hand, despite the time it had gained to cool down. "It's fine," Naruto said, and Hiruzen was smart enough to read the subtext. "Let's go." That was that. The two made their way to Inoichi without further conversation, and as Naruto nudged the door open with his foot, his eyes met Inoichi's teasing ones, vanishing all the uneasy feelings that resided within him not a minute ago. It was stupid, to still hold Hiruzen accountable for what he'd once felt in his childhood. Those bitter emotions were fleeting even when was a teenager, and now, after entire decades to forgive the man, it didn't make sense to not at least be amicable towards Hiruzen. "Smells a bit weird, don't you think?" Inoichi commented, grasping the styrofoam cup in his hand. "Oh yes?" Naruto asked with a raised brow. "If your sense of smell is so great, why don't you join the pack of our tracking Ninken, senpai?" "Ever irritable you are," Inoichi sighed despondently before turning his attention towards Hiruzen. "Take a seat, Lord Third." He shifted the heap of papers to the side of his desk, placing his cup on the polished wood carefully. "We've got a lot to discuss." "I've gotta leave?" Naruto asked, already making his way towards the door. "Nope," Inoichi's reply surprised the blonde, who stopped mid-step to turn his questioning gaze at the man. "This concerns you, to an extent. You made that paralysing seal, didn't you?" "Jiraiya-san did," Naruto corrected. "I just provided the basic idea and a few key arrays." "Potato. The Yamanaka flourished his hand dismissively, beckoning his employee to sit down. Naruto followed the instruction, not bothering with futile protests. He was curious about this after all. "You know about the raid that'll be held at Danzo's base next month?" Naruto rolled his eyes, Not surprised that the TNI head knew that he knew, and you also know how that seal is going to be used extensively to take hold of the Rutanen non-lethally. Of course, the blonde said, turning his head towards Hiruzen. What's this about, again? Why's Lord Third here? He's joining them on the mission, Inoichi informed, lips twitching up at Naruto's parted lips, a gesture of surprise. In fact, he's got the pack of seals with him at his residence to have a final look. I'm sending you to collect them later. Right now, we need your help with something else. Usually, we'd ask Jiraiya-san, but he's back on the road for the next month or two. So, asking you is worth a shot, we figured. Naruto nodded, guessing correctly that they need his assistance for the formation of another seal. Blindness. Naruto repeated. So that's the strategy. Hiruzen nodded in confirmation, an uncharacteristic smirk on his face. Our Jounin commander is fond of such backhanded tactics. I'm aware. Naruto stole a page from Inoichi's folder and begins a basic seal matrix, one he remembered from his timeline's Jiraiya's notes. It'll take some time. And silence. Think you two can manage shutting up for an hour or several? Inoichi knocked his knuckles on Naruto's head in a strangely affectionate manner. Brat. I'm really getting tired of all your demands. Might cut down on your salary too. You won't, Naruto said with confidence, you're too much of a decent man to do such a thing. Inoichi laughed, short and muffled, you've got a unique way of complimenting people. Shut up. Okay, Inoichi acquiesced, darting his gaze to Hiruzen, who was once again immensely entertained by the scene before him. Shall we head out for a walk then? I don't mind, the older of the two men said, heading towards the door. Naruto continued on with the seal for the next 60 minutes, before getting bored by the tedium of sitting on the chair. He changed locations, and perched comfortably on the ottoman by the window, brush in hand and parchment on the knee. When the two adults walked in again, he was almost done with the very basic matrix of the seal, and before going any further, he had decided to wait to get it checked. Maybe he could send it with a toad to Jiraiya and the man could look it over and maybe make it for him. It's not like correspondence was a problem when the two shared the same summons. He told Inoichi as much and the man agreed with the plan. He'd been skeptical about sending the son in a hawk with the request for a seal when they can be easily intercepted, but toad summons are infinitely safer for communication. That's done then, the Yamanaka clan head declared, stretching his shoulders. You get going with Lord Third. Stack all the seal packages in our storage room, did you get that? Yes, sir, Naruto threw him a salute. Oh, you forgot to drink your coffee by the way. Shit, Inoichi lunged for his drink like it'd fall over if he wasn't clutching it tightly to his chest. It's cold now, but it's still coffee, he consoled himself. Naruto shrugged, following Hiruzen out the door, and both of them broke out into a fit of laughter, however contained, when Inoichi's shout of "Why the fuck does my coffee taste like the soles of my feet, damn it?" reached their ears. Walking to Hiruzen's modestly sized 3-story house was a novel experience for Naruto. He didn't remember ever being to the man's home before. It was very practical, just like the person who lived in it. Plain brown floorboards and light orange door panels made most of the living room, where Naruto spotted the piles of sealing papers. He was intent on getting to work as soon as possible so he could head home early and have a nice, quiet night to himself for once. Hiruzen had other plans though. Stepping on the sturdy flooring of the hall, the man immediately shoved Naruto under the kotetsu and pulled steaming cups of tea out of absolutely nowhere. A shinobi should always be prepared, is all the answer Naruto got when he questioned Hiruzen about it. It's a unique blend, the man supplied, himself relaxed under the thick blanket of the center table. Herbal, jasmine, green, I like to mix them up and drink whatever comes of it. Naruto coughed after the first sip. Clearly the method didn't work so well for his mild palate. Tastes good, he remarked nonetheless. How are you doing? Hiruzen asked again, less weary and more determined this time. Determined for what? Naruto's hadn't the faintest clue. I'm fine, old man, and oh, there was the familiar name again, and something in Hiruzen's eyes just melted. How are you? Same old, Hiruzen said with a smile, the friendly grandfather aura shrouding his hardened shinobi instincts naturally, easily. Back pains and joint aches are quite bothersome, but I think I've got a good few years before any senility starts creeping in. Naruto shook his head, sipping some tea again. Don't fool me, he said, looking out into the open courtyard with trimmed grass. The only reason you're going on this mission is because you're senile. Or smart, Hiruzen mildly retorted. Danzo's not a foe to be taken on by mere jounin. Mere jounin? That's what you call the best crop of your shinobi. Not mine, anymore, the once Kage said with a sad smile. But yes, the difference between a Kage-level nin and a jounin is the difference between a bonfire and a forest fire. That's just something to inflate your ego with. Naruto looked at Hiruzen. Give a bonfire enough time to catch onto a tree and what you have is forest fire anyway. Exactly, Hiruzen said, approving of Naruto's thought process. Time is a valuable resource, Naruto. Not many shinobi live to my age and boast of decades upon decades of field experience. I have that, and Danzo does too. Besides, I hardly think it necessary to justify my choices to a chunin who hasn't seen the hardships of a Kage. It was strange wording, strange because despite saying so, Hiruzen was definitely justifying himself and his decisions to Naruto. The blonde wanted to react, to bite back and say something that would shut Hiruzen up, to say that he had no idea of the hardships, the struggles Naruto had had to go through and overcome, but the assessing look of the old man stopped him in his tracks. The retired shinobi wasn't having the same conversation that Naruto thought they were having. This was weird, the gauging quality to Hiruzen's eyes. Looking into Naruto, waiting, watching, probing him to trip or slip. What are you doing? He asked, straightforward as usual. Deciding, Hiruzen simply said. Deciding what? And Naruto was definitely getting antsy now. Whether my suspicions are right or not. And what might those be? Hiruzen turned his gaze away, pointedly staring at a lone crack in one of the cemented walls. I got a peculiar report during the Chunin finals, he began, voice burning like a low simmer over a stove, purposeful and sharp. At first, I was just a little bit alarmed. Not much, I'll be honest. Just a tiny amount of curiosity too. It was a civilian messenger, from one of the small settlements a little ways from Suna's border. You want to know what he brought me? Naruto shifted, an edge of something about Hiruzen feeling immensely uncomfortable. He felt exposed. Irrational as the feeling was, Naruto couldn't shake it off. He didn't know how this conversation had gone downhill so fast, but he had to keep up, lest he lose track of it altogether. Yes, he replied, sweat trickling down his neck of its own volition. What did you receive? Hiruzen turned around, looking into Naruto's eyes with faint traces of a smile. Ashes, he said. Ashes of some unnamed, unknown shinobi, supposedly. That wouldn't have raised any questions. Countless ninjas die each day, sometimes in brutal ways that not even their bodies remain. What caught my attention though was something else he brought along, a ring. Naruto's eyes widened just a tad, and cursed when he realized what this meant. Hiruzen caught his momentary deer-caught under spotlight look and chuckled, bewildered and so disbelieving. I was right, the man said, I am right. Right about what? Hiruzen leaned forward, urgent and quick. You fought Itachi Uchiha to a standstill on your first C rank. Naruto narrowed his eyes, yes. So what? And you fought Kisame till you almost defeated him as a chunin. Hiruzen continued, as if Naruto hadn't spoken at all, with eyes focused onto the blonde yet looking at something intangible, something far away. You also assisted Jiraiya in the defeat and capture of Itachi. You won the chunin exams, granted everyone was only genin level, so it's not as astonishing as your other feats. Hiruzen frowned in thought, and Naruto could practically see the cobwebs detangling themselves in the old man's head. Seals, too. That array you drew today. That was the final nail in the coffin. That base, it's never been used before. That's knowledge yet unknown. And somehow, you, without any education about sealing arts, managed to draw it. Which means, you're either an unprecedented genius or someone already taught you that base. Naruto tried to remain calm even as Hiruzen kept uncovering trails the blonde didn't even know he'd left behind. Kakashi, Hiruzen said abruptly, then Jiraiya, then Shikaku, and now Inoichi. They've all been suspicious of your prodigious talent, Naruto. And had it been anyone else, anyone I hadn't monitored during their childhood, I would have been elated to have such a versatile shinobi in our forces. But you, Naruto, Hiruzen's eyes blazed with accusations and anger and rage and controlled fury that came completely out of left field. You never had the chance and the time to grow into such a balanced and adjusted individual that you are now. When Jiraiya raised his suspicions, I dismissed them, but that was before Orochimaru's death. And it's confirmed, you knew about it already, when the news hasn't even been made public knowledge. You knew it because you were the one who took him down. Naruto sat there, eyeing Hiruzen with stiffened shoulders and a tensed body. It was out then, Hiruzen knew too much, given the information he had access to as a Kage. He'd got all the pieces already, and Naruto wouldn't be surprised if Hiruzen figured out the time travel part too. He wasn't going to sit there and act ignorant, act like he didn't in fact kill Orochimaru. There was no shame, no guilt, no remorse, only wariness behind Naruto hiding what he'd done. So he shrugged, genuinely unbothered by Hiruzen's epiphany. Yes, he repeated. So what? Hiruzen stared at Naruto for a good few seconds before laughing hard, landing his head on the table with a soft thud. Naruto felt an unfamiliar brand of amusement, watching the usually uptight shinobi dissolve into a fit of hilarity, momentarily forgetting his mortification about the fact that this man probably knew most of things Naruto had sought so hard to keep secret. How? The question was muffled into the kotetsu table, spoken between huffs of genuine laughter, and Naruto hesitated to say some bullshit, to craft a half-truth, half-lie answer and not reveal his side of things. The prior feeling of being exposed had evaporated into the floaty relief of finally letting go of something he'd held onto for so long. I've got experience, Naruto finally settled for that. Experience which I'm assuming you got before you were genin. Naruto smiled as Hiruzen looked up again. You can say that. Future, Hiruzen said, nodding to himself. My sensei always thought that if things weren't changed for the better, our future would be doomed. You're from the future, aren't you? How? And Hiruzen understood what Naruto meant. How did he know this? This truth that no one in their right mind would accept as is. I was Tobirama Senju's student, don't forget. An experimenter more than he was man, that guy. He was looking into space-time jutsu, you know. Time travel, to be precise. He never reached any breakthroughs, but I'm assuming you did. Someone else did, Naruto said truthfully, I just took advantage of it. Fair enough, Hiruzen replied, why? Why did I come back? Naruto asked and smiled thinly when the other man gave him a nod. Circumstances, he admitted softly. I might have been foolish, and more than a bit selfish, but I don't regret it. I didn't come back to save the world from certain doom, I just came back to save my future, my happiness, I guess. Hiruzen picked up his tea again, somehow looking unruffled despite the revelations he'd had that day. You're wrong, he smiled inside his cup. You're saving the happiness of many others, Naruto. Whether you may realize it or not. Naruto didn't ponder over it. He never really liked shining a heroic light on his actions. Instead, he cast a nervous look at Hiruzen. You won't tell anyone, I assume. I won't. I see no point. So far, you've only done things in favor of Konoha, and you show no inclination to do the contrary any soon. I didn't think you'd be so cool-headed about it. Hiruzen winked, he actually fucking winked. I wasn't Hokage the longest for nothing. Naruto sat himself more comfortably, a vague sense of mystification lingering in his mind, because how in the actual fuck did Hiruzen deduce his time-traveling secret, and how is Naruto's head not on a spike already? Still, he said, if I knew you'd be so agreeable, I would have come out about it sooner. Well, now I know, Hiruzen said, and you can't do shit about it. So might as well tell me how the future looked like for you. Naruto sighed, resigned to the fact that one alive person now knew his actual story before looking at the pyramid of seals he had yet to transport. Who will take care of those? Hiruzen threw the packages a thoughtful glance before honest to sage, grinning at Naruto. Monkeys and toads might make a good team, don't you think? Naruto grinned back, fox-like with just the tiniest edge of craziness, already building up chakra to summon Gamekaki. Let's exchange stories of our time as cages, then, shall we? Now, of all times, Hiruzen sputtered out tea from his mouth. Chapter 36, Honesty. Itake's room was plain and bare, located on the third floor of the cage tower. Besides a few frames of generic floral art, his temporary home wasn't much to look at. His routine was quite simple these days: get up, shower, change, do a light jog around the central stadium and then get back for breakfast. He couldn't do much more than that. He knew he was being watched and followed. It made him feel seen, scrutinized. Privacy was a luxury for a former traitor, it seemed. But today, he didn't mind it. He didn't mind that there were concealed nin present in his room, checking his every movement. Because he was busy anticipating the arrival of his brother, Sasuke, his dear little brother he hadn't spoken properly to for so long it actually hurt to think about it. He'd get the chance today, to sit down and have some words with him which weren't insults or barbs. Itake longed for it, and when a knock sounded on his door, his walk towards it was more eager, more desperate than it ever had been. "Sasuke," Itake whispered in greeting, throat suddenly tight with emotion, and sidestepped to let him in. In return, Sasuke gave Itake a stiff nod and walked in to reveal the pink head who had accompanied him for this particular encounter with his brother. Both Chunin settled onto the sofa located by the open glass windows, and Itake felt awkward, relieved, and heavy altogether. His mother's sharp voice of always offer guests an appropriate welcoming drink rang in his head, and he cleared his throat to pose a question. "Would y'all like some tea? Or, maybe water?" Sasuke gave him a look at that, and unbeknownst to Itake, Sasuke himself was reminiscing days when their mother sat them by the courtyard and gave them lessons on how to be hospitable. It was a funny look that didn't convey loathing or anger, so Itake counted it as a win. "Tea," Sakura said when Sasuke refused to give an answer. "We'll have tea, thank you." Itake thought about reciprocating Sakura's lovely smile before realizing that it wouldn't be sincere. He didn't want to fake anything towards Sasuke ever again, so he simply nodded, and retreated into the kitchen to put some water to boil. While he worked on the tea, whispers from inside the living room made his way towards him. He didn't try to eavesdrop or decipher the mumbles he heard. When he entered the hall again, a tray with 3 steaming cups of tea in hand, he marveled at how domestic this all was. How it was a stark contrast to the blood and battles he'd become so accustomed to. The pacifist in him reveled in this peace, this life of homely actions in his brother's company. "Thanks," Sasuke muttered, accepting the offered cup. He refused to meet Itake's eyes. An irrational part of his mind was convinced he'd see hatred reflected in them. So, Itake began once they'd all taken a few sips of their beverage. I'm glad you came, Sasuke," then belatedly, "Sakura." "I didn't want to," Sasuke was quick to say. "But I felt like I had to." Itake's brow furrowed. "Why?" "I need to hear you out," Sasuke said, shrugging. "Now that my anger has settled a bit, I realize I've never really heard your side of things. I don't know what was going on when you did all that you did. We never really spoke, you know? Maybe I was too young to understand your struggles, but I think I would have preferred if you told me what was on your mind back then." Sakura looked at Sasuke approvingly, and Itake realized it was probably her persuasion that caused his brother to admit this to him. "I understand," he replied, trying his best to show some vulnerability, to cause cracks in his self-made mask of stoicism. "From where do you want me to begin?" "The very start," Sasuke said, clutching the side of the couch in preparation. "I want to know everything." Itake wanted to be truthful. He wanted to confess and admit and share what went down, how it went down. But it was difficult. There was too much to say and too less words in the dictionary to convey the myriad of his emotions. He had to try, though. He had made an effort to portray his feelings to Sasuke because there wasn't any other way to mend what was broken between them. So he started and he told Sasuke the story of his life. This wasn't the time to erect barriers or withhold information. It was the time to be open and honest, something he'd never managed to be with Sasuke before. I had to prevent the coup." Itake spoke slowly, even as his throat tried to clamp shut with the knot of guilt ever present inside him. It felt wrong to justify his actions, felt like cheating Sasuke in some way, and Kami knew he'd done that countless times already. Nevertheless, he persisted. I didn't want to see a repeat of the war in Konoha. Ironic, right? I became a cold-blooded murderer to prevent other cold-blooded murders. Itake's chuckle was bitter and brittle, and Sasuke learned more about Itachi through his eyes than through his words. I put you under Tsukuyomi because I wanted you to hate me, Sasuke. Completely and thoroughly. I didn't think I deserved your love or adoration after what I'd done. Sasuke wanted to laugh at that. Hysterically. He could see his brother's sincerity, but it angered him that Itachi had failed to understand that some types of love weren't conditional. That they didn't have to be deserved. That Sasuke had never stopped loving Itachi, only his hatred had been even stronger, 10 times more potent, but the love, it had never went away. To kill me. That's what I wanted from you. That's why I had to be that wretched, cruel man towards you, Sasuke. Itachi went on and on. He said things as he saw them, and Sasuke was surprised at the amount of blame Itachi took upon himself. He was guilty, that was clear as day in his eyes. Weighed down by years of remorse that had festered into something worse, self-loathing. And Sasuke burned. His eyes watered with unshed tears, his palms twitched with the need to throw something at his stupid brother, because why the fuck could he have not told him this sooner? His mouth wanted to breathe fire and his tongue wanted to cut Itachi with vicious, hurtful words because he couldn't sit there and see the brother he'd come to see as an enemy become undone before him so willingly, so achingly. I'm sorry, Itachi said at last, looking outside the window with solemn, serious eyes. I'm so sorry, Sasuke. I regret what I've done. I really do. But I want to do better in the future. I want to be a better big brother to you. I want to atone. Will you let me, Sasuke? And it didn't happen often, and never at this scale, but Sasuke cried. He cried like he never had before. There weren't any sobs or howls but just steady streams of tears going down his face because he'd felt agonized, tormented, betrayed, and now hearing the person who had caused it all acknowledge what he'd done, it felt overwhelming for Sasuke. He couldn't distinguish if these were tears of frustration or relief. Because as he soon realized, this outburst of buried emotions was making him feel lighter, weightless, like an immense load had vanished from his shoulders, leaving him breathless and eager and oddly soothed. He didn't know what he was expecting from their talk today. Maybe some old bones getting dragged from graves, maybe some half-authentic tale of things. But listening to Itachi was too much. His side of things wasn't the other side of the same page. It was a scorched, burned, and shriveled up piece of parchment no one cared enough to salvage, and some part of Sasuke regretted it. Regretted the wholly negative thoughts he'd had for his brother for so long, and why did it not sting to call Itachi his brother anymore? When Sasuke could look through his tears again, Itachi was staring at him with the same guilty eyes, sporting tears of his own, but there was a spark in them that spoke of hope, and the younger Uchiha never wanted to snuff it out. Sakura had turned away some time ago, when things between the two brothers had become too personal, too real, and she felt like she was intruding upon something she shouldn't. She sat in the kitchen now, upon the wooden countertop, and smiled as she heard what she could only call the beginning of healing. "You're an idiot," Sasuke said, sniffling like he was 5 again, crying after getting his knee scraped. "I'm sorry," Itachi repeated, and looked at Sasuke like he was the most precious thing in the world. Like Itachi had gone back to his older self, when he looked at Sasuke with soft, protective eyes, and Sasuke launched himself off the sofa. He couldn't help it, he needed to know if his brother was real. And after years of explosive hatred, of brutal fights, of lost love, the two Uchiha brothers hugged. It was the most comforting embrace Itachi had ever experienced, and he wound his arms around his wonderful brother so tight Sasuke struggled to breathe. But he didn't mind it, he was doing the same for Itachi. It was almost after 3 whole minutes that the two came down from their emotional high and pulled back with evident hesitance. Sakura revealed her head through the partition right that moment and smiled teasingly at the two. "Enough sap for today." Sasuke glared at her, but something had softened in his eyes, something had caused the darkness that usually sat in them to recede, and the pink head couldn't help but beam back. And though Sasuke knew that everything between Itachi and him wasn't all better, that they'd have to have many more difficult conversations, he wasn't afraid of them anymore. In fact, he wanted to get through them so they both could finally go back to normal, well, as normal as they could get after everything they'd been through. "My," he started, looking at Itaka's pale face that had blotches here and there. My apartment has an empty bedroom. For a moment, Itaka kept staring at him, uncomprehending and then disbelieving right after. Do you? Itaka felt uncertain. Off balance. He didn't know how to answer such kindness because that was what Sasuke had always had in him and it was what he was showing towards Itaka right now. He didn't think he'd get an offer to live with Sasuke already. He didn't think he'd earned it. But his brother was having none of that, for even with a tear-stained face and heart, Sasuke rolled his eyes in the most insolent manner he could. Of course, big brother, and Itaka heard more than he felt, the sounds of something broken getting stitched back together, getting mended by those teasing words of his little brother. So, you in or? And when Itaka nodded, a reluctant small movement of his head, something poked his forehead and he only had enough time to realize who was the cause of it before Sasuke's half-smiling, half-laughing face was before him. Pack your stuff and be there in a few days, Sasuke ordered, keeping his hope firmly out of his voice. But he didn't have to, not when Itaka looked so hopeful, so grateful himself. Will do, Itaka muttered and stared as Sasuke waved him goodbye, talking in hushed tones with his friend, as the two exited his home. That's when Itaka finally felt it. Pride. He was so goddamn proud of Sasuke, and for the first time in his life, Itaka Uchiha grinned. The process of piecing together the shattered bits had really, truly begun. Chapter 37, The Raid. Do not engage. Ibiki Marino's stern command drew every Chunin's attention. Your primary task is to carry out the bodies of the root members once they've been released. Do it quickly and efficiently. We don't want to cause them harm through the collateral damage that is sure to ensue. Understood. A sharp round of yes, sir went around the open space and Ibiki turned his attention to Inoichi, who was standing 2 steps ahead of him. A few ways behind the leading members of the Chunins stood Sasuke and Sakura. The Uchiha knew all about this planned raid, mostly through the vague conversations Naruto and Shikamaru had whenever he met them. Apparently, the creepy dude who kept eyeing him during the Chunin finals had been involved in some rather shady acts, and today they would put an end to them. He wished to know more though, to be on the front lines and get further information about that guy. Especially because he'd heard something about stolen Sherry Nons. This is getting quite boring, Sakura's muttering drew his attention. If everything's ready, why the fuck can they not kick into action already? Since when did you get so impatient? Sasuke asked, raising a brow. Didn't you hear Inoichi? They're waiting for the spy's signal. Sakura blinked. As a matter of fact, I didn't hear that part. Sasuke side-glanced her, noticing the bags under her eyes that had grown more and more prominent as the week went by. Another rough week? Tsunade's still not convinced. Sakura turned her head away, crossing her arms to show her offense. Nope, she said. I've tried thrice already. She's declined my request every single time. Hinata got the same treatment. Do you think Tsunade-sama really doesn't want to be a teacher to anyone? Shizune-san still remains under her tutelage, I don't get it. What am I doing wrong? Sasuke shifted on his feet, unsure of how to tackle this particular issue. 2 weeks ago when Sakura had come back with bloodied knuckles, an ugly bruise on her cheek and proceeded to challenge Sasuke to a spar, the boy had been sufficiently baffled. He'd rolled with it though, because that was what Sakura needed then and he wanted to help her in whichever way he could. They'd fought and fought till Sakura lay on the dirt, another myriad of cuts on her arms, and when Sasuke had asked what happened between huffs of breaths, Sakura had glared but refused to give an answer. The next day, she'd come back again and dragged both Sasuke and Naruto to the grounds. They had sparred but Sakura'd pushed herself too far. Naruto had stopped her by the shoulders then, forced her to a tree and pulled her down. She'd landed on the ground, her mouth opened to shout at Naruto, but instead she'd ended up revealing what had been bothering her so much. She refused to take me on as her apprentice. Sakura had said, more distraught than Sasuke had ever seen her before. I showed her all the healing techniques I already knew. I showed the letter of recommendation Mrs. Misa wrote in my favor. She seemed impressed too, I think. Then she asked me why I was so interested in medical ninjutsu. She had paused, brows furrowing in absolute confusion. I said, I wanted to heal people. Prevent pain for them. She stared at me and asked if I was sure. If these were my true motivations. I said yes, and the next thing I know, I'd been dismissed. Is it because I'm not as good in taijutsu? Tsunade-sama's speciality lies in it too, doesn't it? I need to get better, guys, or I'll lose this opportunity to be trained by a Sunin. Naruto had been confused too. This hadn't sounded like anything that had occurred last time around. Granted, Tsunade had been a bit softer on Sakura, considering they'd just lost their teammate who had abandoned the village. But she'd always been interested in passing on her knowledge, and even now, Naruto doubted that aspect about her had changed. So what was this? A test? Some petty dislike towards Sakura and Hinata? All answers he could come up with had seemed to miss the mark, and Naruto had simply lifted Sakura's spirits by agreeing to spar with her till she was certain of her own improvement. Then and even now, Sasuke found himself with a lack of assuring or soothing words. So he settled for an unbothered shrug, hoping maybe, that Sakura could be just as unbothered vicariously through him. I doubt you're doing anything wrong, he said. This seems to me like it's Tsunade's problem, not yours. Maybe she's just too busy with her new duties to accept the mentorship of someone. Sakura hummed, I've thought about it that way. But I've been observing her, you know. She's always complaining about lack of action to Shizoan. I'd think she would really like training someone else, if only because she'd get a break from her desk duties. Besides, even Shizoan wants her to take on another student. Why don't you just train under Shizoan? Sasuke asked. I thought she was ready to train you. She was. Still is. Sakura kicked a small pebble forward in mild agitation. But she's a poison expert. While that area of attacking and curing is something I want to get good at, chakra healing is more important for me to master. Sasuke rolled his eyes. He really couldn't empathize much more than this. If the Hokage's not ready to train you, just fuck it. It's not that simple, Sakura interrupted, fully aware of what Sasuke was suggesting. I can't just get all my knowledge from books, and as great a teacher that Mrs. Misu is, she herself has admitted that she no longer has anything left to teach me. Sasuke was about to ask another question when a shout from Ibiki drew their attention. We've got the signal. The man's voice was firm. Move in with your squads, and try to avoid contact with the enemy. Sasuke nodded at his squad of 7, and the Chunin ran through the grassy field till they were right before a grey metallic door, embedded inside a small hill on the outskirts of Konoha. The security system consisting of various traps had already been dismantled by the Jounin, who had long since begun the raid. With careful and long strides, the Chunin entered the root base. It started with a long corridor, at the end of which was an open hall. There, lying on most flat surfaces, were bodies of cloaked nin, still twitching, pupils visible through the holes in their masks. Stretchers were brought in for the ones who had been injured before parleyed, while the rest were thrown over their shoulders and hurriedly transported to their temporary base a few meters outside the entrance. Sasuke and Sakura picked up one of them by the arms and legs and got to work. The soft clacking of ninja sandals on smooth tile went around them as every able-bodied ninja helped in the evacuation of the parleyed root members. The cycle carried on for a good few minutes before they all heard a low rumbling originating from the center of the base. Minute tremors reached them through the ground and they quickened their movements. They all knew the main battle had begun. You're not going anywhere, Shikamaru informed pointedly, shoving Naruto into Danzo's private quarters. 3 more members from the TNI joined them inside. Why not? Naruto asked, as he carefully pulled a bundle of papers into his backpack. This collection of important intel shouldn't take too long. Besides, the old man clearly wanted my help, don't you remember? Oh, Shikamaru definitely remembered. He still wasn't certain what that request was all about. Lord Third had showed up 3 days ago, with an appeal to recruit Naruto as his official backup for this mission. Inoichi had of course smiled nicely at the man before telling him, in no uncertain terms, that he was being moronic and that a Chunin had no business dealing with people like Danzo. He's got the creepy wood dude Inazuma-sensei with him. Just stay put, for fuck's sake. Naruto rolled his eyes, opening up drawers and shoving another set of files in his bag. I won't die, Okami, he said, exasperated by Shikamaru's subtle concern. And if you're so worried, why don't you come along? Shikamaru groaned, lifting the mattress off the bed. Fat chance. I'm not moving a single inch once we're done with this shit. He squinted then, come look. Another fucking seal, that too, on his bed. It's like the guy's got a fetish for fuinjutsu. Naruto chuckled, bending low to see the engravings on the wood. Looks like a locking seal. Preserving and protecting something. Can't crack it though, it's too advanced for my knowledge. Shikamaru shrugged, we'll just report it to Inoichi. He can drag Jiraiya-san here whenever he's back. Okay, Naruto nodded, now back to my side mission. There's no side mission, Shikamaru turned, signaling to another Chunin to help him pick up a desk by the wall. I refuse to engage in this conversation any longer. Suit yourself, Naruto shot back, disappearing in the bathroom for a bit before returning. Anything fishy in there? The Nara asked. Naruto made a weird face, considering something the rest weren't. Yeah, he said. He's got an insane amount of eye drops. Shikamaru stared at him for a second before muttering hope the guy didn't think that stuff was lubricant. Thankfully, none of them heard his musings and continued with their task at hand. Naruto jogged through the long gray tunnel-like corridors, darting his gaze behind him every so often. He didn't particularly enjoy sneaking out this way, but he had to make sure everyone got out of this in one piece. Besides, he doubted Shikamaru would realize he'd left a shadow clone behind unless his stupid copy popped out before he could return. Then, he'd possibly have to face Shikamaru's wrath that seldom showed. The sounds of battle intensified till his feet landed in a thin layer of water. He switched to walking on the ceiling. Best to not alert anyone of his presence. The fight against Danzo was in full swing in the huge battle arena the man had built to train his own root army. Carefully placing a genjutsu on himself and masking all of his chakra, Naruto crawled inside while remaining in the corners of the room. The first thing that came into his view was Asuma. The man's face was utterly blank, hands outstretched but unmoving. Naruto took a moment to process what this meant, but Asuma was in action again. There was intent on his face, clear as day, as he gripped on his chakra knives firmly. Only, he didn't move towards Danzo. Asuma made a straight run for Hiruzen, but Tenzo was quicker, more alert, and he'd gotten over his shock faster than Hiruzen had. Flexible wooden beams emerged from the ground, coiling around Asuma's body. The man was forced to a halt, but he directed his built-up force towards the wood, tearing through it with the help of his wind chakra channeling weapons. How dare you? Hiruzen looked sharply at Danzo, aware that his enemy couldn't see him at the moment. Nevertheless, he tried to seep as much disdain as he could into his voice. You've never been one to shy away from dirty tactics, Danzo. Using my son against me. He shook his head, building up chakra for an earth-based attack. Danzo was already moving, having sensed the mounting chakra. Temporarily blinded by a seal, his other senses had sharpened over the course of this fight. Naruto creeped towards the center of the ceiling, careful to not let even a wisp of chakra astray. Making Danzo aware of his presence now would take away his advantage. He really wanted to do something before Danzo had the chance to use his Nagi even once. A tide of earth cracked through the cemented floor, right as Danzo's water jets blasted from his mouth. A rather futile attempt at blocking, if one were to ask Naruto. It seemed Danzo's chakra was still replenishing following his use of Koda Amatsukami on Asuma. Speaking of the man, he was once again onto Hiruzen, his signature smoke fire attack at the ready. The retired Kage turned his attention to his new foe, hesitating to use any kind of hurtful force against his child. Meanwhile, Tenzo's attacks were blocked by Danzo. The Umbu captain persisted with his attacks, sending blocks of wood and a tangle of twisting trees to counter Danzo's lightweight wood attacks. He had far more control over his inserted bloodline than Danzo did, but the older man had more experience, more cunning, more viciousness to keep their bout in his favor. Hiruzen had summoned Inma by then, hoping that if he couldn't, his summon could deal some harm to Asuma. The Monkey King had no qualms against giving Asuma a hard shove, and a rib-cracking kick. Asuma winced, dodging another one of Inma's punches, performing a clumsy body flicker to get out of Hiruzen's wind blade attack. What happened the next instant was a rapid blur of motion. It started with a sudden surge of chakra, coming from none of the four currently involved in the battle. Hiruzen spotted Naruto first, his blonde hair illuminated by the almost electric blue sword held in his hand. It was the same one he used against Gaara's sand shield, made purely out of his chakra, just 10 times more potent, more condensed, more dangerous. Danzo moved before he could even register that Naruto was after him. It was pure reflex or, perhaps, fear. It was too late, though. Naruto was prepared. More than prepared. He never intended to behead the man. He had something far more important to strike. With a crackling sizzle of chakra meeting flesh, Danzo's enraged shout was but a whisper in the arena. A wave of vibrations burst forth as Naruto's forceful attack tore through all the protections of Danzo's seal and his right arm fell to the ground, no blood, no bone in sight. It was all over in 5 seconds. Cut off from chakra, the Sharinans wrapped under the bandages gave no sign of being present, but by the horrified look on Danzo's face Hiruzen could tell his former friend had just lost much more than a limb. Momentary shock turned to muted apprehension. Danzo's eye blazed with unfathomable anger and his killing intent was focused solely on Naruto. Tenzo was already moving, Hiruzen right behind him, but Naruto didn't seem to buckle under the pressure. Danzo knew it already. He knew there was no winning today. He knew at the moment his own personal guard had deceived him. He knew at the instant he'd seen the files of Jounin marching into his base with narrow-minded determination to put an end to Root, the organization he'd given his everything to. He knew at the moment he'd seen Hiruzen with the same fire in his eyes that had led Tobirama-sensei to choose him as his successor. And he knew it, even now, when the Jinchuriki who'd just snatched the only trump card he'd had without a second of warning, stood before him with loathing in his eyes. He knew it, even as he sensed Hiruzen's hurricane of water and Tenzo's volley of wooden spikes aimed for his vitals. He knew it, he'd known it for quite some time. But he also knew that if he wasn't going to win, he wasn't about to let them win either. So he ripped apart his robe, his face adopting a vicious snarl. The black markings came to life, embedding themselves deeper into his flesh. Naruto halted in his tracks. A memory flashed through his mind, rising his hackles. He recollected Sasuke's mumbled recounting of how Danzo went down. This technique, it sealed people in a certain radius along with Danzo. Get away! Naruto yelled, causing Tenzo to abort his jutsu and Hiruzen to furrow his brows at Danzo's rapidly blackening form. I said get away. Naruto tugged harshly at Hiruzen's arm, his own body glowing a bright yellow, a stark contrast to the darkness Danzo was shrouded under. The older shinobi shook out of his stupor, only to start running away from his once teammate. The exit was the only thing on Tenzo's mind as he bolted, but Hiruzen, he couldn't move out without his son. I'll get him, Naruto whispered fast when he saw the man glancing behind him. He didn't wait for a reply and moved in Asuma's direction, whose eyes were still blank, still unseeing of the danger they were in. A month ago, Hiruzen wouldn't have moved, wouldn't have placed his trust in someone else. He would have tried to save Asuma himself, fighting till his own bitter end. But today, he knew 2 things. 1, he couldn't erase his mistakes by dying. And 2, Naruto Uzumaki was the most skilled ninja in the room. So, he took off with a boost of wind, creating as much distance between himself and Danzo as he possibly could while pulling Tenzo along with him. The last thing he saw before a huge chunk of the root base imploded into nothingness was a sudden flash of yellow, a streak of bright light, and in that moment, Hiruzen knew he'd made the right decision. Chapter 38, Vulnerability. Don't lie to me, Sarutobi, Inoichi hissed, eyes focused on the relaxed form of his former leader. I'm not, Hiruzen said. There was no one else. Asuma, Tenzo, and I took Danzo down. Plain and simple. Oh really? Inoichi asked, raising a brow in sarcasm. Then why is it that our sensors spotted ambient Kyubi chakra where the battle was held? I said, Hiruzen spoke sharply, firmly, that there was no one else. Inoichi sighed, slumping into his chair. He knew Naruto must have been involved in the final fight somehow, but Hiruzen refused to budge, and with no solid proof he couldn't confront his new protege about it. It was best to let this go anyway, there was no point in digging into a matter already resolved. Fine, you win, Inoichi grumbled. What are you planning on doing now? Your last official mission is over. This and that, Hiruzen waved an idle hand. I want to pick up some hobbies. How does singing sound? Inoichi blinked. I can't deal with this. Please, Ex-Hokage-sama, get out. Hiruzen chuckled, standing up. As you wish, he walked towards the door. Good luck, Inoichi. Yes, luck was exactly what he needed to deal with the aftermath of Danzo's downfall. You need to stop sulking, Sasuke said, lightly kicking Sakura's side. The kunoichi glanced upwards, expression vacant and dull. I'm not sulking, she replied blandly. I'm contemplating strategies to impress Tsunade-sama. No, Sasuke sat himself on the grass beside her. You're just sulking. Sakura elbowed him, huffing, yes, fine. I'm sulking. So what? If you want me to stop, come up with some great idea that can convince the Hokage to train me or get lost. Sasuke stared at her for a minute before standing up again. He outstretched his hand. Let's go. Where? Sakura said even as she accepted his hand and got to her feet. Somewhere, Sasuke said, walking away with purpose. Sakura followed, albeit reluctantly. In another 10 minutes, it became abundantly clear where they were headed. The cage tower. Sakura asked, halting. Shut up, Sasuke's reply was just a tad exasperated, and keep walking. Sakura held her ground. I won't. I don't want to bump into Tsunade-sama by mistake. I can't deal with that bullshit right now. Sakura, Sasuke said in a whisper, turning towards her. If you don't walk, I swear to Kami, I'll carry you to the tower. Sakura blinked at him. Was he flirting with her? Knowing Sasuke, he probably wasn't, or at least if he was, he'd done it unintentionally. All right, Sakura acquiesced, if only to get out whatever this situation was building up towards. But if anything happens, I'll poison your food. Sasuke hid a smirk as they resumed their short journey. Thanks for the warning. I appreciate it. The moment the two step into the tower, Sasuke held Sakura's hand way too firmly and pulled her towards the stairs. Hey! Sakura yelled. What the fuck are you doing? Something I should have done weeks ago, Sasuke replied, increasing his pace. Sakura contemplated striking her friend in the back or tripping him or running a chakra-infused fist through his skull. In the end, though, she just went with the flow. She was a little curious to see what Sasuke had in mind, and it wasn't like she couldn't pummel him after all was said and done. They reached the cage's office and Sasuke knocked twice on the door, quick and loud. Come in, a bored voice came through the other end, and Sasuke almost threw Sakura inside, himself entering right behind her. Tsunade looked up from her current signing work and raised her brow at Sakura's startled appearance and Sasuke's purposeful staring. To what do I owe the pleasure? She asked, her honeyed tone conveying her annoyance. Sasuke kicked the door shut, once again pulling Sakura towards the chair. The kunoichi wrenched her hand free, glaring at the Uchiha. I know how to walk, she whispered furiously, a little angered that the person she admired had to witness her stumbling around like that. Sasuke shrugged, and took a seat. Sakura did too, if only to prevent the other Chunin from forcefully pushing her onto a chair. Tsunade kept staring at the two, tapping her foot lightly under the table. She really needed to get this paperwork sorted lest Shizune keep her away from drinking tonight. Sakura is a great medic, Sasuke said abruptly yet with a very calm and expressionless face. Tsunade gave him a small frown. And, Sasuke repeated, she's responsible, mature, at least most of the times. She's self-assured, so she doesn't make blunders even while healing gruesome injuries. She's not afraid of blood or gore. She's not queasy. She's trained in defensive genjutsu, but her taijutsu is in no way lacking either. Sasuke stopped, taking a breath. He turned towards Sakura and found her staring with mild bewilderment at him. He supposed it was expected, never before had he so much as indicated that he thought of Sakura as competent, let alone in so many words. Sakura said, blinking and looking away. I'm not that great. He's just exaggerating. She turned to look into Tsunade's assessing eyes, so you'd take me on as your apprentice? Oh. The Hokage commented, relaxed but serious. And why do you not consider yourself all that? I've seen you've got the skills, you yourself have shown them to me. Sakura stayed silent for a bit, fidgeting with the edges of her battle tunic. She sighed then, letting her feet idly kick the wood of the desk lightly. Because those are just my positives. And there's more to me than that. I'm clumsy, sometimes. When I'm worried or agitated. My input of chakra is always a little less, which is why I take longer to heal a wound than the average certified Medi Ninja. My punches break tile but not stone. I'm easily startled. I take really long bathroom breaks on missions, she huffed a laugh, pulling free a strand of her hair. It's whole list, 10 pages long, and even that's when I'm being generous. So no, I'm not some perfect little kunoichi with big aspirations. I'm just a kunoichi who wants to get better at her area of specialization and who might snore a little too loudly in her sleep. Feeling a tad self-conscious, she switched her gaze towards Sasuke. He was looking at her with a weird expression, the edges of his face appearing a bit softer. Sakura didn't know what to make of it, so she just kept her eyes fixed on his hair till she heard Tsunade's voice. That was quite the monologue, I must admit, the older woman said, finally some amusement seeping into her eyes and words. Sakura, look here. The pink head did, some confusion marring her features. I see potential in you, I truly do. You've got the guts, the knowledge, the mind, the strength to make a wonderful combat medic. Tsunade lingered for a bit, and Sakura could see the but coming. But before today, you were too perfect, too polite, too compliant. You really wanted me to see you that way, huh? You know what though? This Sakura, this real you? With rough edges and ragged lines and so many flaws? That's real and authentic and very much human. A medic understands what it means to be human, what it means to be such fragile creatures. Tsunade cut herself off, and stood up. Placing her hands solidly on the table, she leaned forward, piercing through Sakura's gaze with her own. I ask you again, Sakura, she began. Why are you interested in medical ninjutsu? Sakura gulped, unsure of what to say. On one hand, she still agreed with her previous answer, she really did want to heal people. She really wanted to help them. To challenge that thought, she had some other feelings that ran deeper, that she herself wasn't sure about. She sighed, figuring it was worth a shot, to be a bit vulnerable than she'd allowed herself to be. Firmly ignoring Sasuke's presence, she returned the intensity of Tsunade's stare. Because I want to prevent the grief and loss I'll suffer if I let an injured person die, especially if that person is close to me. I want to heal, so I can feel useful, in a way. I don't have a lot of chakra or skill. But one thing I'm good at is control, and that's why I make a good healer, which means something to me. That I'm an important member of any team I'm put in. That I'm not some airheaded, bubbly kunoichi who's too full of herself. It's my way of proving myself, I suppose. She paused, exhaling a rushed breath. My motivations are a lot more selfish than I thought. Tsunade kept silent for another few seconds before sitting back on her chair, all rigidity gone to leave behind a plain, blank visage. Okay, Tsunade said. You two are dismissed. Sakura bit her lip. It was done. Nothing could impress Tsunade. Not skill, not bravery, not competence, not honesty. Sasuke frowned, looking at Tsunade's unimpressed face. Come on, Sakura said, standing up and smoothing out the creases on her clothes. Thank you for your time, Hokage-sama. Sasuke reluctantly got up, feeling a bit guilty for putting Sakura through all that. Sakura, Tsunade's voice reached them just as they were about to step outside. Be here at 1 p.m. tomorrow with wrist guards and lots of water. Sakura stopped, blinking, completely uncomprehending of what she'd just heard. Pardon? She asked, and saw Sasuke's face break into a smug smile from the corner of her eyes. Water and guards, Tsunade repeated. You'll need it to get through the hell I'm about to put you through. Sakura's face lightened, finally understanding what this meant. She nodded her head in a daze and didn't protest when Sasuke pulled her by the arm again. Tsunade watched them go with a spark of mirth and beginnings of fondness. That girl was definitely something. To open up about her true feelings that underlied so many of her insecurities was brave and unexpected. She was sure she'd have fun teaching Sakura, and maybe, if Hinata was ready to show the same spirit and determination, then her too. She sighed and looked at the documents overflowing inside the file. Time to get to work again. Pass me that box, Shikamaru asked tiredly. It's literally 2 steps away from you, Naruto said, scrutinizing the rusted kunao in his hand. How old is this stuff anyway? Everything's practically garbage here. Shikamaru made a frustrated sort of sound. Box. You. Pass. Me. No, Naruto said, only because it was funny to watch Shikamaru be so lazy. Use your legs and get it yourself. I don't have legs. They're 2 blocks of wood that refuse to budge, so give me that chunk of cardboard already. Naruto hummed, moving farther away from said box, wandering into the storage rooms in the basement of TNI. I said no, the blonde replied teasingly. You know we should prank Inoichi. I've got a way to cut his hair without him realizing. Naruto, Shikamaru called out, arms crossed, expression suddenly stern. I know exactly what you did the other day, by the way. When you ran right into Danzo's battle and left a clone behind who kept avoiding using his chakra, lest he poof away. Naruto laughed nervously, placing the kunao on an old table nearby. You're not mad. Oh, I am, Shikamaru drawled. But I won't do anything about it on one condition. Naruto raised a brow. Oh? And what is that? Pass me that box and we're sorted. The blonde gave out a short, startled laugh. Dragging his feet, he picked up the box and almost threw it at Shikamaru. You're a fucking wonder, you know that? Naruto asked, huffing as he lifted yet another heavy-looking thing. Shikamaru nodded, peering inside the box to find some old, expired food supplies. I'm aware, he said, then softer, a whisper, but so are you. Chapter 39, Development. The man before them sat with forced rigidity, pressing his back against the cool metal seat. As he was, with hands tied behind his back, he couldn't even squirm without hurting his shoulders. Naruto stepped closer to the captive, eyes shining with a cold fury that rarely showed. Black markings climbed the ninja's seated form, scarring his tanned body from foot to neck. The dark tendrils came to a halt at the man's sternum and lingered there, threatening and warning him to not do anything out of line. Why? The blonde hissed the question he'd asked twice already. The shadowed lines tightened around the man's neckline, lightly cutting off his air supply. The shinobi held Naruto's intense, questioning gaze before he looked downwards, struggling to breathe. He still could get some oxygen to his lungs, but just barely, and he was well aware it would only get worse the longer he refused to provide the information they were asking of him. Was P paid? He forced out and was immediately rewarded some reprieve from the firm choking. He hungrily took in a few long inhales before another question was directed at him from the other person in the large, bare gray room. Who are you? Daichi, he answered truthfully, his resolve to remain tight-lipped cracking under the all-too-real threat the 2 shinobi before him posed. Shikamaru made an annoyed noise in the back of his throat. Which village are you affiliated with? I'm not, he lied. Instantly, his bicep was gripped by the blonde and hot, burning chakra scorched his arm. He tried to pull away but to no avail. The heat stopped, and he understood this was just a taste of what he would have to withstand if this interrogation stretched on. He gulped, IWA. Naruto sighed through his nose, not at all surprised by this turn of events. He glanced at Shikamaru, whose eyes were locked with their mentor's, who was observing the proceedings through the glass box located at the top right of this unit. The Nara turned to him, considering something before his entwined hands detangled and the shadows retreated till they vanished completely. He nodded at him and silently headed for the door at the far end. Naruto faced Daichi again. The relief was painfully drawn across his features even as his forehead creased with a sweaty frown. Thank you for your cooperation, he said blandly, a plain smile to go with it before he too swiftly walked out the door, locking it shut. That was intense, he announced the moment he met up with Shikamaru again, who was seated on one of the small, uncomfortable stools lining the dull corridor. Tell me about it, the Nara muttered, shifting so he could look at Naruto. We've got, 2 minutes before Inoichi comes looking for us. Wanna hide in the storage rooms again? Shikamaru gave him a wavering grin, still a bit shaken up with the torture he'd had to inflict despite the mildness of it, despite the necessity of it. Nah, he stayed seated, and Naruto joined him after a moment. Let him mother us today. I think we deserve it. The blonde hummed, his shoulder pressed flush against the other boy's. True. We did it, though. We passed. Well, Shikamaru responded, some of the dismay leaving his eyes as he looked forward to what this meant for them. That is true. I'm napping the whole day tomorrow for celebration. Not a bad idea, Naruto said, one leg crossing over the other as he leaned back towards the wall. But how about something more frisky? Snorting, Shikamaru shut his eyes as he shook his head. I don't associate myself with this adjective. Come on, Naruto insisted. Besides, you promised to give me a tour of the Nara forest and it's still unfulfilled. I'll think about it, Shikamaru responded, a small smile tugging at his lips, and the two lapsed into comfortable silence. Naruto rolled around the information he'd received in the last hour. Daichi, though ultimately harmless, posed a threat to Konoha's internal security. The shinobi had managed to infiltrate Konoha's medical force and had acquired a lot of information about the current political situation of their village. He didn't doubt that the man had successfully relayed most of that intel to the Tsuchikage that nosy old man never knew when to stop poking around. Suffice to say, Itake's public re-enrollment into the shinobi corps must have reached IWA, and knowing how anal they were, Tsunade was sure to receive some strongly worded letters about accepting a previously rogue nin, that was monstrously powerful, into their forces again. Another thing to consider was Iwa's awareness about the Akatsuki. Naruto knew that Tsuchikage had used the group's services quite a few times before, and if his estimations were right, this was about the time the cage started gaining Akatsuki's attention. Which meant that if he were to receive any leads about Obito's movements, it was there in IWA. My boys. Inoichi's enthusiastic yell drew their attention, and Naruto immediately launched away from his stool lest Inoichi's arms wrap around him in a very paternal hug. Shikamaru, though, wasn't as fortunate when it came to quick reactions and tolerated Inoichi's tough love with resigned amusement. That's it, the Nara said once he sensed the embrace getting too long, and firmly pushed the Tni head away, who took it in stride, a smirk dancing on his lips. But I haven't even shown the full extent of my overflowing pride yet, Inoichi lamented. How about some barbecue tonight? My treat. Count me in, Naruto retook his seat. I am already quite hungry. That's the spirit. Inoichi clapped his hands. Shikamaru. The Nara took an unnecessarily long pause before agreeing to the planned dinner. So, Inoichi's face grew severe, steel entering in his tone. That was an interesting session. Quite the information we received, wouldn't you say? Briefly, they all acknowledged Ibiki, who'd silently joined the small group before Shikamaru spoke up. We're gonna get a lot of shit from the other villages if IWA lets Itake's reinstatement out. He was spotted several times, doing odd crimes around while he was undercover. Not to mention, he's considered an inter-village enemy. What's our cover story? Naruto inquired. Are we gonna confess that Konoha elders staged the massacre? Inoichi eyed the two of them for a bit before he decided to share a little of what he knew. Yes. Honesty would do us all some good. Besides, Danzo's dead. Hotaru and Koharu are kicked off their esteemed positions. Lord Third is, for all intent and purposes, forced into retirement, which works in our favor. He can no longer be scrutinized for his prior errors. Nice, Naruto commented before deciding to change the topic. Jiraiya-san's coming back tomorrow, isn't he? It was Ibiki who nodded, handing a slip of paper to Naruto. Yes, he's due to return tomorrow. The man's voice was gruff as ever, but months of familiarity had showed Naruto that there was more to Ibiki than unyielding indifference. Read that. Apparently, the man wanted this to be a surprise. Hence, he didn't use his beloved toads. Naruto accepted the parchment with some apprehension. Surprises, when they came to his idiot master, were rarely a good thing. However, when his eyes scanned the words, a delighted grin overtook his face. We're going to train you at MT Miyaboka first. It's time I passed on your father's legacy to his rightful successor. He schemed over the rest of unimportant catching up the Toad Sage deemed to share with him in very tiny handwriting, given the note was barely the size of his palm. His gaze landed on the scribble by the end, and he thanked his lucky stars for Jiraiya's impeccable judgment as a spy master. Gotta get you a new identity too. After all, there's no other way we can get into IWA. His mind wandered to Daichi, and he thought it was only fair they do this. The notion coaxed another anticipatory smile on his face, and that was when he finally noticed the conversation going on around him. They're way too eager to get their hands on you, Inoichi expressed, waiting to see Shikamaru's reaction. I don't mind that, the boy said flippantly. I've always wanted to join the analysis team, or did you forget why I joined TNI in the first place? Hang on, Ibiki advised, pulling 2 chairs by the corner so the 2 adults could sit on them. The whole passageway was secured by metal doors on both ends, so they were assured this conversation wasn't going to be intruded upon. You've not even heard what Inoichi has to say yet. Cool, Shikamaru shrugged, turning his attention towards their head. Carry on, what do you want from me? Tell me. Inoichi's gaze switched to Naruto, then back to Shikamaru. Do you think you were a good interrogator back there? Yes, the Nara responded without hesitation. I got the information out, didn't I? We did, Naruto corrected with a roll of his eyes, but Inoichi didn't seem too concerned about team spirit at the moment. Exactly, the Yamanaka said. You know your jutsu has excellent potential in this department. You don't even have to cross that line towards gory torture. Intimidation and a taste of what those shadows can do, and I've no doubt the poor bastards are gonna spill their guts out. You saw it happening today yourself. All right, Shikamaru replied. I can agree my clan jutsu is effective here. But I still don't know where you're getting it. Stay here, Inoichi said simply. Continue working at the T&I. Shikamaru raised a surprised brow at that, and Naruto voiced the thought the both were thinking at the moment. You wanna train him to be the next head? Inoichi shrugged, unrepentant that his motives were clear as day. He wasn't trying to be subtle about this anyway. Precisely, he responded. You two are way too smart for me to beat around the bush here. Ino's not even interested in TNI. She's going to be on a need basis. Only to use the mind arts if we're short on Yamanakas. But she's chosen her specialization genjutsu, and I'm already out of candidates. So, you. Shikamaru sighed, rubbing his temples. It wasn't that he disliked the TNI. Quite the opposite, actually. He'd learned a lot of useful things here, and he knew he'd just scratched the surface. He liked the atmosphere of TNI as well. It wasn't a hustling force, most members had weekly assignment and limited hours of work beyond which they were only called in for rare emergencies. Everyone here sought information, knew the importance of knowledge, and Shikamaru could relate with that very well. But becoming this department's head wasn't what he'd dreamed for himself. That, however, didn't mean that the idea had no appeal to it. I'll consider it, he finally replied, shooting Inoichi a dry look when the man beamed at him as if he'd agreed already. We've got a way to sweeten the deal actually, Ibiki said, nudging Inoichi to stop smiling like a fool. You can be an employee of both departments if you like. Hybrid worker. We've got a few of those around. 3 days of work under each department, 1 day off. How's that sound? Definitely sweet, Shikamaru replied, and it truly was. This was an arrangement that he could definitely see himself in, best of both worlds, so to speak. He turned towards Naruto to see the boy's opinion of it and got an encouraging squeeze on his arm as a reply. Great, Inoichi chirped, getting up. You think about. Get me your decision in 2 days' time, all right? In the meanwhile, let's go have some food. Naruto stood up, rolling his shoulders and pulling Shikamaru to his feet. How heavy is your wallet today? He asked midly, as the four made their way towards the exit. Very, Inoichi looked dubiously at the blonde. Why? Because I plan to make it very light by the end of this dinner. Inoichi paled. You're focusing on thinking about it too much. Sasuke paid half a mind to attack his gentle teachings and focused on the incoming kunous, predicting their trajectories. His eyes blazed crimson under the sun, pupils moving rapidly to catch sight of any and all incoming projectiles. He let his mind get blunt this time, following the instincts born solely out of the input his bloodline provided, and moved gracefully, weaving in and out of the line of fire as he caught each kunao. He suffered some minor cuts, but he successfully caught and dropped every weapon thrown his way. If he had to hazard a guess, he did this for at least 150 kunaus. You're getting better, Itaka praised, a small smile evident on his face. Sasuke ducked his head, redoing the bandages along his right wrist that had come undone sometime during the exercise. He cut off the chakra pull towards his eyes and blinked to get settled with the dull vision again. He was getting more and more used to the constant changes in his level of perception. "I know," he murmured. "Kakashi's been training me." Itaka silently fell in step beside him as the two brothers walked back to their apartment. "How's administration treating you?" Sasuke asked, side-glancing Itaka. "Got bored of it yet?" "No. It's quite pleasant actually," Itaka answered in a quiet voice, thinking back to the peace, monotony, and passivity of pushing papers around, drawing up schedules, listing, and attending important meetings. He didn't mind the inaction of his job. On the contrary, he preferred it. Besides, Shizun-san keeps me company and so do Izumo and Kotetsu. They're a lively bunch. Sasuke regarded his brother with open curiosity. They hadn't had much time for idle conversation these last few months. He'd been pulled back into a cycle of training and missions and he wouldn't want it any other way, but that meant he couldn't interact with Itaka often. They went for a few dinners whenever they were both home, and he'd sparred a handful of times with the other Uchiha too, but they were few and far between. "The Umbu approached me for recruitment," he said abruptly. He felt the need to share this with Itaka for some reason. "They want you back too," they said. "You will never come back, though, will you?" The lines on Itaka's face tightened and he halted their walk, breathing deeply. "Never," he confirmed. "Sasuke." Sasuke waited for Itaka to articulate his thoughts and digested the fact that his brother wouldn't ever use his strength at the forefront again. At least not unless it was absolutely necessary, and some part of him was happy for Itaka, glad that his brother was finally getting his break from violence that he'd always despised. A tornado of subtle expressions breezed past Itaka's pale visage before the man locked eyes with Sasuke. "Be careful, little brother." That's all he said before he started walking again, assured that Sasuke would be right beside him sooner or later. Sakura coiled her fist backwards, swinging it forward with as much momentum she could gather. She could see her opponent's foot twisting to her left and knew the Hyuga would dodge the hit if given an escape. She brought her leg 3 steps forward, directly in line with Hinata's dodging movement. Instead of faltering, Hinata brought her palm down and struck on Sakura's thigh in one clean motion. Unfortunately, she still remained close enough for Sakura's attack to land and both kunoichi ended up on the ground, cradling their bruised parts. Tsunade tooted from the sidelines, playful in her mockery. "Seems like you two have a long way to go." She threw 2 bottles of water towards them which Sakura caught with minimal effort. "True," she replied, unscrewing the lid. "But we've already come quite a ways too." Tsunade sighed happily. "This confidence, this is why I love you two girls so much." Hinata laughed softly, looking at her mentor with respect and fondness. It hadn't been easy, this banter and comfort between them, but they'd gotten here after nights of bloodied fists and days of nausea after hours and hours of healing. "Sensei," she called out. "When will Jiraiya-sama be returning, if you could please tell me?" Tsunade sat directly on the dirt ground, leaning her elbows on her thighs, cross-legged and utterly content to let her tunic get spoiled. "A couple days," she replied. "Why?" Hinata let out a short breath. Just wanted to talk about something." Tsunade assessed her posture with one look, hunched shoulders, fingers fidgeting with her pants, eyes downturned. Hinata rarely got nervous around her now, so this was definitely unusual. Nevertheless, she wasn't going to force the girl to talk if she didn't want to. "All right," she said. "I'll let him know you want to speak to him once he's back. Now, get up too. Let's start from the top. Hi." Ino took in the boy's appearance. Then, she turned to give Asuma a look that conveyed just how stupid she thought her teacher was being. Chuji, bless his soul, stepped forward to accept the hand offered by the thin, oddly dressed guy. "Hello," he greeted amiably, and he was subjected to one of the most fake smiles Ino had ever seen from the boy. "Why are you so pale?" she asked, shoving her face into the boy's personal bubble without remorse. He seemed completely unaffected by it, though, and blinked at her. "Less melanin," he offered his response, politely stepping away from Ino's imposing figure. "Ino," Asuma drawled with exasperation. "Play nice." "I am," she replied moodily, once again turning her scrutiny-filled gaze towards the boy. "What is your name?" "Sai," he said, smiling again. "I paint." "That's nice." Choji was unfazed by Sai's oddities. "Can I see your work?" Sai gave him a nod and pulled out a worn sketchbook from his satchel, handing it over to the Akimichi. "Are you always like this?" Ino asked, looking between Choji and Sai. "Like what?" Sai inquired. "So, fake?" "I don't know what you're talking about, Ino-san." Ino huffed, crossing her arms. She didn't know who this Sai person was, but her dad Inazuma-sensei had informed her that he was once a member of Root. She knew he was a troubled boy, most likely, and her forceful attempts at getting a reaction out of him hadn't worked so far. She wasn't going to give up so easily though. She had a whole Chunin exams to give side by side with Sai. She was sure she'd figure something out. "Come," she said, turning on her heel. "Let's show you our training grounds." Naruto laid on his bed, sighing as his muscles relaxed. There was a buzz behind his eyes, his chakra pulling his consciousness inside, and he gave into the sensation, opening his eyes to see Kurama's stretched form, awake and alert already. "Been a while," he said, relaxing in his headspace, which looked increasingly pleasant the more time went by. "Got something important to tell me?" Kurama yawned lazily before his eyes sharpened and he bent till his nose was inches from Naruto's face. "Kukyo and Kome. They're gonna get targeted soon." Naruto's eyes widened. He knew those two-tailed beasts were the first to get captured, but he thought it happened after he'd returned from his training. This was much earlier than he'd expected. "Shit," he cursed. "That's a problem." Kurama made a considering sound deep in his throat before his tail flicked gently. "I think not," he said. "You, Naruto, have caused ripples." Itaki and Kisame are out of the Akatsuki and Nagato is no doubt agitated about it. His plans must have been hindered. He needs new members. Maybe, he's found them already. Maybe not. But whatever the case, you've got the power to put an end to this all, preemptively, you realize. Naruto nodded, his characteristic determination burning brightly in his eyes. "I know," he said, lips stretching into a grin. "But how about I take a nap before I go around saving the world again?" The Baijuyo grinned back, wild and uncaring and so very approving. "Of course." Chapter 40, Adieu. Naruto. "Patience, Sakura. I said I'm coming. I've been waiting for your ass out here for 5 minutes now. Come. Out. Right. Now." "Kami," Naruto sighed as he swung open the door, only to come face to face with a very irate Sakura. "Would it kill you to wait without trying to break apart my door?" Sakura huffed, crossing her arms as she eyed him up and down openly. "What were you even doing inside? You're still dressed in such shitty clothes." "I came home late from my shift," Naruto explained, shoving one hand in his pocket while the other rose slightly. "Shall we?" Sakura's irritation gave way to a small, reluctant smile, fond nonetheless, as she hooked her arm around his. "We shall." "You look great, by the way," Naruto complimented as they made their way down the stairs. Dressed in a simple maroon, knee-length dress with her hair tied in a high ponytail, Sakura did look quite good, and she herself would admit it without hesitation. "Thanks," she said. "You still look quite rubbish." Naruto grinned, "Thanks. I try my best." The two friends kept up light conversation, inquiring about each other's training and plans till they reached their destination. Entering the small, lively restaurant owned by one of the nicest folks in Konoha, the Akimichis, they were immediately spotted by their group of friends. "Sakura! Naruto!" Ino yelled for them, waving a hand to beckon them over. The two made their way towards the large table, eyes alight and smiles on their faces. "Happy birthday, you!" Naruto wished Kiba, patting the boy on his back. The Inuzuka scratched his neck, grinning at the blonde. "Thanks, dude. I'm glad you both came." "Wow," Sakura whispered from the side, already settled beside Ino. "Kiba. Did I just hear you being all formal?" Kiba rolled his eyes, throwing a napkin at the pink head. It was intercepted by someone and Sakura turned her head to see who'd done it. Shino stood with his hand outstretched, somehow expressing his disappointment while hidden behind huge glasses and the collar of his jacket. Be a gentleman for once, Kiba, Shino admonished in the flattest tone possible. Then, he added, happy birthday. Kiba grumbled about traitor teammates but was soon above his bad mood as more people joined in for his celebration. Sasuke walked in right after Shikamaru, both looking haggard, like someone had forced them into showing up, which knowing them was probably the case. In the next few minutes, all of Konoha 12 were seated around the table, taking in the different aromas of steaming fresh food. This is so good, Kiba moaned around a bite of chicken, immediately adding more of it to his plate. Pass me the rice, please, Hinata asked and Shikamaru obliged, chewing on some spicy dumplings. Here, try this. Naruto shoved a piece of charred fish on Sasuke's almost empty plate. It's fucking awesome. I can serve myself, Sasuke said dryly, nibbling the edges of a rice ball. Stop being a mom. Uncle. Chuji yelled across the room, and a middle-aged kindly man with spirals on his face came into view. After a quick discussion, more dishes were ordered by the Akimichi, who seemed to be having the time of his life. The night progressed with similar cheer, easy banter flying across the table, and when the dinner came to an end, Lee gave Kiba a hug that nearly punctured the Inuzuka's lungs. Neji and Tenten had to use brute force to get their teammate to stop clinging, and after some more pushing, pulling and stumbling, Konoha 12 were standing outside the restaurant, stomachs full and contentment etched on their faces. After a murmur of goodbyes, Team 7 and Shikamaru headed in one direction while the rest lingered to talk some more. Why are you coming this way? Shikamaru asked Naruto, the group of four walking at a leisure, relaxed pace. He's coming over to yours, silly, Sakura piped in, her smile teasing the Nara. Can't leave you alone now, can he? Naruto elbowed her side, don't forget that Sasuke here is also escorting you home. All three of you are, Sakura replied even as her arm brushed against Sasuke's as they walked. Sure, Naruto said with a roll of his eyes, silence falling over them once again. The four were happy to just walk in each other's company and come to terms with some of the new patterns of their lives. After dropping Sakura to her apartment, Sasuke bid the remaining two a swift goodbye. So you're actually coming to my house? Shikamaru asked, as they lazily walked towards the Nara compound. Of course, Naruto said, gaze flitting from one streetlight to the next. You're giving me the forest tour? What? Shikamaru asked blandly. Right now. Yup, responded Naruto, picking up his pace as he dragged Shikamaru through the last two streets. No buts. No backing out. We are doing this right now. Shikamaru didn't reply, but he led the way straight to the edge of the compound, the west end where the Nara forest began. Naruto followed after him with a smug air about him, glad that he'd convinced Shikamaru to let them have this moment. That's a tree, Shikamaru said as he began his tour, nodding at a tree. He pointed at another bark, and that's another tree, and that, it's another tree, and that. Naruto stomped on his foot, a short laugh leaving his throat. Yes, thank you. I thought these big brown and green things were carrots. Well, it's my pleasure to educate the stupid. No big deal. Just then, Naruto stopped walking and gripped Shikamaru's wrist, steering him to a tall tree. Race you up? He challenged, already channeling chakra to his feet. Shikamaru sighed, knowing the energy he'd have to expend, but nodded his head nevertheless. Go. The two immediately shot off the ground, taking long strides on the thick trunk of the tree. Naruto reached the top branch first, Shikamaru following shortly after, looking extremely annoyed. IWI. Don't, Shikamaru glared at Naruto, plopping on the branch, leaning against the bark as he rolled around his neck. Here, take a seat. Naruto shrugged and fell beside Shikamaru, both their feet swinging slowly beneath them. The view's pretty awesome, Naruto murmured, soaking in the quietness of the forest, occasionally broken by animals hopping between trees and grass. Beautiful, really. Shikamaru hummed softly, used to come here a fuck ton as a kid. Dad loved sitting with the deer. They retreat during nighttime, but usually they're all pretty eager to hang around us Naras. Konoha's forests really are something, huh? Shikamaru hid a smile, except for the Forest of Death. That place is horrid. True, Naruto said, chuckling. What happened with Inoichi this morning? At that, Shikamaru's frame tightened with annoyance. I accepted their offer, of course. But that man conveniently forgot to tell me that working in 2 departments means increased work hours. Naruto nudged his side, half comfort, half playfulness, and responded, "You're gonna be the head there, which means you will get to harass new recruits someday down the line. That's fair trade. No pain, no gain, right?" "Whatever," Shikamaru muttered, but pressed heavily against Naruto's side, eyeing the skyline shrouded by the inky blackness of the night. "You leave in 2 days, don't you?" Naruto stayed silent for a while, long enough that Shikamaru decided to look at him. The blonde's eyes were fixated at the scene before them, half of Konoha visible in all its dark, yet cheerful glory. His face was soft, a sad sort of fondness in his gaze, and Shikamaru didn't know what was causing such an expression to take root on Naruto's face. "Hey," he said quietly, letting his foot hit against Naruto's to draw his attention. "Are you fine?" Naruto broke out of his short trance and glanced at Shikamaru, shaking his head slightly. "Yeah," he said, the same fond gaze directed at Shikamaru now. "Just gonna miss my home, you know." "I know," Shikamaru returned, relaxing again, "but no point getting all emotional about it. It's not like Konoha's going anywhere." "That's what I'm worried about," Naruto thought, remembering Pain's rapid assault and how it had all but obliterated the leaf in the blink of an eye. "Right," he said instead, trying to ease some of his worries with the knowledge that his comrades and friends would protect his home in his absence. "By the way, Ibiki told me that you fell down while walking." Jiraiya ducked to enter the boring-looking building with his usual, boisterous presence, making a beeline for Inoichi's office. Without knocking, he went right in, spotting not only the Yamanaka but also his mentee seated on the couch. "Inoichi." "Naruto." He greeted loudly, going to give his student a nudge, but Naruto gracefully moved out of the way, giving a thump on his teacher's back instead. "Good to see you back, sensei," he spoke over his teacher's grumbles, taking a chair and sliding it in the Toad Sage's direction, who took a seat without protest. "Before we get to the idle talk," Jiraiya looked at Inoichi, "Anko's heading here, isn't she?" Inoichi nodded, causing a relieved smile to appear on Jiraiya's face, and then he started again, rambling on and on about his journey through the land of sound and how he hunted down Orochimaru's remaining forces, barging into his many bases and putting an end to his evil machinations. No sweat. Naruto listened with interest, because for all the boasting and exaggerations his master was fond of, Jiraiya was providing relevant and true information about his exploits, and 6 months of TNI training had taught him how to filter the unnecessary embellishments from the plain facts well enough. Their one-sided conversation was only cut short when, after some banging, Anko kicked open the door and gave the son in a saccharine-dipped smile, too sweet to be sincere. "Old man, why the fuck did you summon me in middle of a dango eating contest?" Jiraiya shifted on his seat, and instead of a joking reaction his visage turned serious. "It's something important, Anko." "Oh." The kunoichi said, crossing the room in an instant, narrowing her eyes at Jiraiya. "This had better be good or I'm skinning you alive, I'm telling ya." "It is." Jiraiya stood up, a particular gleam in his eyes Naruto hadn't seen before. "We're getting that damned curse mark off of you." Anko's eyes widened. "Anko!" Naruto called out in a forceful whisper, shaking her arm back and forth. "Oh, come on. Wake up, you woman." And just like that, Anko's eyes blinked open, staring at Naruto's semi-worried features before dazedly scanning the other occupants of the room. When her gaze landed on Jiraiya, she immediately shot up, but a searing pain shot through her neck, keeping her on the bed she'd been lying on. She settled on glaring viciously at the man instead. "What the fuck was that?" she bit out, her left side almost paralyzed by the fierce, white-hot pain. "I told you it would hurt." Jiraiya's gruff voice held a note of apology. But can you feel it now?" Anko's face went blank at that and she frowned. Feel what?" And then, she realized it, the absence of the constant pull at her reserves by the cursed mark, the ever-present trace of some darkness, some sinister energy that plagued her chakra and mind. It was gone. She inhaled a rushed breath, mouth open. Her hand raised to touch the skin that had been tattooed with seals without her consent, and she turned her head to have a look at it. Smooth, unblemished, plain skin greeted her gaze, and she almost sobbed with relief. "Oh my fucking god, was all she could get out in the end, and for the rest, standing there, watching her reaction, it was more than enough. Hinata stood outside the cage's office, heart thudding in her chest as she waited for Jiraiya to exit his meeting with Tsuan-sensei. She idly rubbed her hand around the seams of her jacket and straightened up the moment she heard the creak of the door opening. Out walked Jiraiya, his eyes following Hinata's stiff form, and an easy smile overcame his face. "Ah, Hinata, is it? Tsunade just told me you wanted to speak with me about something. Let's go talk by the counters, shall we? I really need some tea." Hinata merely nodded, trailing behind the Sunin as he headed for the office kitchens and poured himself some tea from the pot, already prepared by one of the long-hour employees. "So," he said, taking a sip. "Anything I can help you with?" The Hyuga gulped, taking in a shaky breath. She didn't feel intimidated by the Sunin per se, just nervous about the reaction he'd give. She didn't expect him to respond negatively, but the doubt hammered into her head since she was a child didn't go away easily. She had to do this, though. For herself, for her promise, and for her clan. So, she steeled herself before looking straight at the man's eyes. "Yes," she said, voice wavering but determined, solid. "I would like you to tell me if you're aware of the counter seal for the caged bird seal the Hyuga clan uses to brand branch members. Or some way to dismantle or remove it. Anything to stop its effects." Jiraiya was clearly not expecting that. He took too huge a gulp in surprise before trying to get it down without alarming the girl. He managed to get his bearings in order. "I have never actively researched on one. Was never allowed to, too many political complications, you see." But. Hinata prompted, looking honest to God, eager for once. "But I can try, if a branch member was willing to let me poke and prod at their seal." "That's possible," Hinata smiled, knowing that Niji would support her in this endeavor. She gave Jiraiya a respectful nod, "Thank you so much. I will be in touch with you through Naruto, if that is fine with you." Jiraiya gave her a wide, reassuring smile, "Of course. I'll be happy to help you out in any way," and though Hinata hadn't put to words her plans, the Sunin knew the ripples that'd soon be caused by this young one would be magnificent to behold. Naruto lay on his bed, wide awake, staring at the ceiling. It was a little difficult to comprehend how little over a year ago he lay on a bed, too, contemplating life as an adult. Now things had changed, for himself and for the past, and he couldn't come to feel regret for any of it. Slowly, he got to his feet and entered the bathroom. After a long shower, he stepped out, drying his feet and toweling his body. Getting into some black shinobi pants, a plain navy blue t-shirt and his Chunin vest, Naruto eyed himself in the mirror. 14. Naruto's mind supplied and he strapped the forehead protector securely on his head. His travel backpack lay stuffed and ready by the corner and he picked it up, shrugging it on. Walking towards the door, he prepared himself for another journey, another 3 years of travel. Only this one was going to be far more important if he had any say in the matter. He knew what he had to do in the coming months and years, and he wasn't about to screw it up, not if he wanted a war to never loom over them, a sword hanging by a string. The sun was mellow today, warm but not scorching, and Naruto took to the rooftops just to feel it a bit more. Half his attention stayed with the people crowding the streets below, hawkers selling their wares, mothers reprimanding unruly children, fathers buying candy and sweets for their kids. By the time he reached the front gates, he was content to leave Konoha behind if it meant he'd come back to this sort of gaiety whenever he did. Jiraiya was already by the exit, chatting with Kakashi, who'd come to see them off. By the other end, Sakura stood with Sasuke, who waved at him to join them. And there, a little behind them, was Shikamaru, leaning against the red bars of the open gate. "Hello there. Come to cry at my departure?" Sakura snorted, as if. "I'm probably the most happy you're leaving. Imagine the peace I'll get in my life now, bloody wonderful." "Precisely," Sasuke chimed in, a small smirk on his lips. "If we cry, you best believe they're tears of happiness." "Rude, so fucking rude," Naruto said with faux offense. "I am deeply and utterly wounded by your words." "Good," Sakura said, nodding to herself with satisfaction, "because that's exactly what we intended to do." Naruto shook his head, all three of them breaking into soft laughter, and in a blink, Sakura had pulled the two into a three-way hug. "Don't die," she whispered, not sadly but in a way that showed she really cared. "And don't kill anyone either. Stay away for as long as you want," Sasuke muttered, already fighting against the embrace, but both Naruto and Sakura kept a grip on him. "I'll miss you two fools," Naruto said, because some emotional honesty never hurt anyone. Sakura huffed onto his shoulder, "Me too." They pulled away, Sasuke looking distinctly uncomfortable as he glared at the blonde and said, "Take care." Naruto refrained from joking about it and gave him a firm nod. "I will. You two do the same." Then Kakashi was there, giving some spiel about providing him teasers of Jiraiya's upcoming books, dancing around the topic before giving a firm pat on the back and saying, "Have fun." Naruto gave a laugh, too used to Kakashi's roundabout ways of saying what he actually wanted to. "That's a given, or did you forget who my master is?" Jiraiya's chest puffed a bit, taking pride in the fact that his student had just called him fun. "Take that," he shouted at the brats who called him an old geezer, in his head of course. "Should we leave now?" he asked Naruto, glancing at the sun still hanging low in the sky. They still had a few hours till noon. "Yes," he said, turning to look at Shikamaru. The Nara's hand went up lazily in a small wave. "Goodbye," he said. Naruto shook his head, grinning at the Nara. "Goodbyes are for losers," he declared, clutching the bands of his backpack. "For us, it's a see you soon. And then he was turning on his heel, walking out the gates with assured, calm steps, Jiraiya already nearing the tree cover outside. Stopping by the edge, Naruto turned around, waving at Shikamaru for the last time in many years to come, a farewell. With Naruto's words echoing in his head, Shikamaru waved back, a small, serene smile settling on his face. In that moment, he knew things would be alright in the future, no matter what they'd have to face, because he'd have Naruto's back, and Naruto would have his. He watched until the blonde disappeared into the forests, and then, he headed for his home. Check the description for the links to the author.